The tape. We do it a little bit different around here.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face.
Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face. Shut up, grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The tape. Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The tape.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro.
The tape.
UGA game day, boy, we ball out. Pull up, put the whole conference in the doghouse. Leave them 6 feet, see me on the win streak. All-star status, go coach and the bench deep. Offense on 10, how we run it? Your best ain't nothing, we gon' send them boys punting. Black and red, got them dead on arrival. Defense hunker down for the tie. Hey, you don't want it with the dogs. Found guy on it, you don't want it with my dog. Break it down, play by play, that's the day-to-day. They know we ain't come to play, boy, it's UGA. Kirby Smart, I cannot play the fool. Back to back, we did not come to lose. Back to back like we got something to prove. Pay your dues, dog nation on the move. What's up?
We do it a little bit different around here.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
The tape. The tape.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face.
Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
Shut up. Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face. Shut up and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The tape. The
Shut
tape.
up and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape. Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro.
Shut up. The tape. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to MBR, or as we like to call it around here, Nothing But Rants, the show where I find topics that I'm oddly passionate about and I pontificate upon them. These are not hot takes, but rather takes that I'm hot about. What's up? You really like that? Let's shut up and grind some tape.
And we are live. It is 8 p.m. on a Thursday night, which can only mean one thing. It's time for MBR. It's time to talk that ball. Talk that ball. That kind of works. Honestly, it does work.
Talk the dog, talk the ball. I like it.
New phrase. Obviously, Brooks is still not here. He is once again on his pilgrimage to gain more football knowledge. But that means, given that it's Thursday, he will be back on Monday. Might be back with a shaved head and monk-like tendencies. I don't know where he's going. I don't know where he's at. But nevertheless, it's me and Jaywell in for the night. Jaywell, how are you doing, my friend?
Oh, dude, I'm doing fantastic. Excited to do another show and a loaded one for a Thursday in the offseason, if I do say so myself. So really excited to dive into these NBR topics and the Georgia topics later on in the show.
Yeah, leaving on Tuesday night, we were like, man, I hope there's a lot that goes on Wednesday, and it delivered. There's a lot of things to talk about. First thing to talk about for us, Jeremy Pruitt is joining in on the, hey, let's just sue the shit out of the NCAA and see how it works for us. If you aren't familiar with the Jeremy Pruitt story, I want to say this was right before COVID, right after COVID. He was relieved of his duties at Tennessee for some alleged unruly ways of paying players. It's a classic McDonald's story, paying papers in the paper bags, all of that fun stuff. The NCAA investigated him. Tennessee did an internal investigation of it, ultimately decided that he was terminated, was given a 6-year no-show clause. He's coaching football or basketball under his dad at high school right now. Mm-hmm. He has decided that he's suing the NCAA for $100 million in lost wages, which is obviously what he would have made, supposedly, had he remained a coach during that time. He's suing the NCAA for that, for being unruly fired, because obviously, right after Jeremy Pruitt was fired for paying players, NIL came down the pipe, and it basically became commonplace that, yeah, we pay players millions of dollars. It's not that big of a deal. It's totally against the rules. Teams have been doing it for years. So I kind of get where Jeremy Pruitt's coming with this.
Yeah, and especially because the whole purpose of this lawsuit, I mean, it kind of sounds accurate. This is kind of the belief that everybody thought was happening. And the grounds of this lawsuit is that Jeremy Pruitt is suing the NCAA because there was a connection between the NCAA punishing him ultimately for cheating and Tennessee, like they were in comeuppance together, if you will. So I understand, because that's kind of what everybody was saying, is like, oh, this was like an inside job someone told on Jeremy Pruitt because he was doing a not so good job with the Volunteers. I believe his record was 16-19 as a head coach with the Vols. So it was time to go. And but I'm just kind of imagining, like, you know, you mentioned it, like this happened right after COVID, and over the last 4 years, Jeremy Pruitt staying up late at night, probably had some insomnia over this, because the hilarious part of all of this is he got in trouble for paying players, and then shortly after this, oh, everybody can pay players. Welcome to the NIL world of college football, where you can basically do whatever you want. Everything is fair game. And you even see the duality of this in our thumbnail of the video of Jeremy Pruitt suing the NCAA after a case of him paying players illegally, to, hey, Georgia's ready to spend a whole bunch of money this recruiting class and this cycle. So, like, the whole duality of this is just hilarious to me. And also the fact of, like, yeah, go ahead and do it, Jeremy. Get one last jab at the NCAA before they are no more. They might as well be no more at this point. But for $100 million, that's a big old middle finger to them, saying, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of losing sleep over this. It's time for me to get my revenge.
Yeah, I don't think $100 million is going to be what, even if he wins this lawsuit, what it's going to be settled at. Pete Nakos had a really good article on this on On3, and it got interesting because he kind of throws Philip Fulmer's name into that, kind of murks up the story a little bit. Philip Fulmer was the AD at the time of Jeremy Pruitt's firing. Philip Fulmer, obviously legendary head coach at Tennessee in the decades prior, retired at around the same time when he was fired, and it kind of raised his suspicion and goes, you know, things were a little murky around there. Apparently, according to this article, Fulmer told Pruitt that he would, quote, handle it, according to the plaint in the suit filed by Pruitt. Claims that the NCAA applied rules against him that had essentially been abolished by 2021, which basically is a legitimate case to say, hey, these rules were changed or disavowed by the time I was being punished for all this. This is BS. He's got an argument. I don't think he's got $100 million argument to it. I think also, and this is just me putting my tinfoil hat on, I think this was Tennessee's way of saying, hey, we're going to get this guy out of here.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, this also isn't just about Jeremy Pruitt trying to get his $100 million. I think more than anything, this is also his way of trying to put this to rest. Like, if he ultimately wins this lawsuit against the NCAA, he gets his rights back. That kind of clears the air around his name as well, and maybe would allow him to go from coaching JV girls basketball to coaching college football once again. Where that might be, I have no idea, but at least might open the door back up for people to say, okay, well, this is settled now. That was way back in the past. We'll get Jeremy Pruitt back into college football. Kind of a way to, like, clear your name in a sense, because let's be real. I mean, it is kind of a nothing burger at this point, considering where we are at in college football now. The idea of a head coach paying football players back then, when other teams were doing it when Jeremy Pruitt was. But again, you can't be speeding way past others on the highway. Like, if other people are going 70 miles an hour, you can't be going 90 miles an hour. That's kind of what Jeremy Pruitt was doing. But yeah, I think this is just kind of a way for him to clear his name in a sense and get himself back into the door.
The interesting thing about this lawsuit, though, and I don't know what it all entails, and obviously $100 million is the big headline of that. We've seen players sue the NCAA for eligibility. We've seen players sue the NCAA for stop investigating us for NIL violations. Why doesn't he just do that? Why does he not just sue the NCAA for saying, hey, I was unruly terminated. I would like all of these, no-show clause orders, because I believe he's still got 3 or 4 years left on it. All of these rules, all these stipulations against me. I think they vacated his wins. I want those out the door. Obviously, the money is going to be a big issue for that, and he would like to be reimbursed for it, but why not just sue the NCAA and take the easier route, which I think is just getting back into coaching? I'm not sure, but either way, I think it's an interesting story, and I think it's one that's probably not going to be the last one, especially if it succeeds. We've seen numerous instances of, hey, this team's going to sue the NCAA to basically, restraining order all this, keep them away from interfering with what we're doing in the recruiting trail. If Jeremy Pruitt succeeds in this, you'd have to imagine there's a bunch of other coaches that have suffered some form of punishment. There you go. Hey, I was unjustly punished as well. I'm seeking losses.
Well, and this might ultimately end up being a part of it, but there was a bunch of coaches on his staff that got thrown into this as well, and ended up getting these showcase orders as well alongside of Pruitt. So I'm sure they certainly feel the same way that Jeremy Pruitt does, but obviously Jeremy Pruitt, the more known name in the mix of this, and obviously a guy that was a head coach of SEC program, was a defensive coordinator for multiple SEC programs at Georgia and Alabama. So the more well-known name here, and maybe an avenue for him to get back into the college coaching world.
Welcome into the show. That is the intro of it. I believe that we've got a litany of topics to discuss, but before we do all that, I have a question to ask the audience. When you come home, does your dog run away from you? Do your kids not hug you? Does your partner, no longer want to stay in the same room as you? It's probably because you stink. And you say, but Kirby, I've been showering every day. Yeah, but are you using the right deodorant? If you're not using Mando, you probably smell like shit. Mando, let me tell you about Mando. It is a vegan, aluminum-free, chemical-free deodorant that lasts you 72 hours. J-Will, how many times do you put on deodorant a day?
I'd probably say like twice a day.
Twice a day. Too many. Once every 3 days is all you need with Mando. Mando is a vegan, chemical-free, aluminum-free. You ever seen the white and yellow stains in a white T-shirt?
Oh, yeah, for
disgusting.
Sure.
It's from chemicals. Oh. All right, so let me tell you about Mando, how you can go get it. Go to shopmando.com. Use code FGN. That gets you 40% off. 40% off.
40% off?
Do you understand? That's $5 off your first order. Do you understand how much 40% is?
Man.
Let's take an uncorrelated, completely random number like 4.5. If you take 4.5 and subtract 40% of that, you got a real problem on your hands. That's how much of a deal Mando's getting for you right now. And the only way you can get it is if you go to shopmando.com, use code FGN to get $5 off your first order. That's over 40% off. Thank you, Mando, for sponsoring this show.
Ah, lovely. I'm glad I won't have to worry about stinking anymore.
72 hours, that's unheard of.
Yeah, it is.
And they've got really cool wipes as well. I know you used those on Tuesdays. So.
Oh, dude, they were so clutch. It made me feel nice and clean.
All right, moving on to probably our next biggest topic, which is Gary Danielson. Longtime CBS color commentator, longtime analyst, played quarterback at Purdue and Detroit, has announced that the 2025 college football season will be his last. He and Brad Nessler are partnered up. I think they've been partnered up since the 2017 season.
Has it really been that long?
It's been about 8 years.
Wow.
Because I remember the Vern Lundquist, farewell tour was 2016. So, yeah, 2017.
Jeez, it doesn't feel like they've been together for that long.
It's been a good minute, but it will be their final year together. Gary Danielson's retiring. Charles Davis obviously taking his place. Another really well-known name in the color commentating world. But I kind of just want to, take this moment to thank Gary Danielson because I don't know about a lot of people in chat. I don't know about how old you are. I came into consciousness of watching football and grew up and was inundated in early 2000s, late 10s SEC football. I fell in love with SEC football on CBS at 3:30. And obviously Gary Danielson, Vern Lundquist, and even Brad Nessler, those voices are the ones I always attributed to it. I don't understand, a lot of people, talk about how, I'm so happy he's leaving. I always liked Gary Danielson, and I think he had a fantastic career.
Well, I think a lot of the hate came from the time where Alabama was really good, and this happens in any type of sport. I mean, turn on a baseball game, listen to two neutral commentators talk about a game between the Dodgers and whoever, and it's going to be a love fest for the Los Angeles Dodgers because they're so good. And this happened with Alabama. Anytime, because Alabama, rightfully so, is in the primetime slot. A lot of times on CBS, Gary Danielson calling a lot of Alabama games, going to show some love to the greatest coach of all time and what he was doing in Tuscaloosa. But yeah, I'm the same way with you. Of anytime I recall games from my childhood, watching college football growing up, Gary Danielson's voice is ringing through my head of those famous calls, or just in general, you just hear Gary's voice. So a legend for sure of college football. Hate to see him go, but I guess that's what one season of the Big Ten will do to you. It'll make you want to quit your job and go do something more enjoyable. So understand it. But again, a friend of the show too, Gary Danielson, heck of a career for him. Hope he ends it on a strong note.
Maybe we can get a third seat over here for him.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe he'll take one of ours. Dude. But no, you did say something about, him talking about Alabama too much, and that really frustrating people. And I have a theory on that. I think when you do become one of these top teams, everyone else in the sporting world becomes so hyper aware of you and hates you. Obviously, everyone wants to see Bama lose. Everyone's sick and tired of hearing about the Kansas City Chiefs. No one wants to talk about that. Chris Collinsworth gets a lot of flack for, every time one quarterback does something that he mentions Patrick Mahomes. I think it's that we're just so hyper aware of that when, someone says Alabama or someone says Patrick Mahomes, Nick Saban, your ears perk up and you pay attention to that immediately. I don't think Gary Danielson continuously just talked about how great Alabama was. He referenced a lot of good things that other teams were doing because the Alabama Crimson Tide were doing it at that time. They were far and away the best team in college football year in and year out. So it makes sense why. But I think it was unfair to say, Gary Danielson just loves Alabama, just loves Nick Saban. So
Well, I think too, and I kind of got a taste of we all kind of got a taste of this year of, I feel like Kirk Herbstreit was one of the more loved, holistically loved people in college football. And then this past season, ESPN strikes the deal with the SEC. They're calling the games, and it's Fowler and Herbstreit calling the football games. And then I start seeing all these things about how people don't like Herbstreit. When you start listening to things more frequently, and that becomes your main source of what you're watching on a regular basis, then you're going to find a lot more things that you dislike about someone, and those are the things that you're going to really focus on. Because I remember by the end of the college football season, there was a lot of Georgia fans that were like, thank goodness I don't have to listen to Herbstreit after this for a while, and this, that, and the other. But I think that once things just become so repetitive, you really start finding out the things that you don't like about someone. Whereas before, you maybe got Kirk Herbstreit calling a Georgia game once a season, maybe, or twice a season, depending on if you're in the playoffs or in the postseason or whatnot. So I think that's just a case of it. I mean, Gary Danielson was around for a long, long time, so you kind of just get used to things and whatever. But he's a legend, regardless of what you say. He is a college football legend for sure.
The honeymoon phase is over with Kirk Herbstreit. That's crazy. Dude, we've got the return of one of our favorite off-season segments. Haven't had a lot of Paul Feinbaum heaters lately. I don't know if Paul's, taking a break.
Did we offend him? Do you think that we got to
maybe
him?
Paul Feinbaum's listening to the show and says, I need to back off on these takes. The boys are
made a whole segment.
Read the article this time, so I'm going to be guessing what it is Greg says. So what's the topic today, Jay Will?
All right, I got actually quite a few, because the most recent thing that Greg said was his top 25 coaches in college football. So the first one I have, there are two, I believe it's SEC coaches. I just lost my list right here real quick, and I got to find it. Where'd it go? So right here. Okay, two coaches in college football in the SEC and the ACC that are better coaches than Josh Heupel.
Two coaches in the SEC.
One's in the SEC, one's in the ACC.
All right, so Kirby Smart's one of them.
Yes.
And I guess I got to assume the only one who's been consistent is Dabo.
Okay, I'm more so saying there was two names that I thought were ahead of Heupel that probably shouldn't have been.
Okay, so ignore Kirby Smart and Dabo.
Yeah, don't ignore the obvious ones.
Okay, so then next best SEC head coach, I guess I would go better than Josh Heupel?
Lane Kiffin was ranked ahead of Josh Heupel.
I don't hate that take.
That's not as controversial, but in my opinion, I think Josh Heupel throughout his career has been a better head coach as of now than Lane Kiffin. And then Jeff Brom, the Louisville head coach, better than Josh Heupel, according to Greg McElroy.
Did he state why? Did he cite why?
So he did a video. I didn't see any quotes in the article that mentioned here's the reasoning behind why I think Josh Heupel is behind Lane Kiffin or Jeff Brom. But I thought that was interesting. When I did my top 10 list, I had Josh Heupel inside of the top 10, because I think that what he consistently has shown, especially over these last two seasons at Tennessee, what he's had to deal with Joe Milton playing quarterback for him, and then also this past season, a first-year quarterback starting full-time in Nico. Despite those growing pains that he's had to go through, the offense has still found ways to be consistent through the run game and his creativity, and then also upping the defensive side of the football, getting the recruiting figured out there as well. And really, that's been one of the more consistent parts of his football team, even though he's kind of labeled as one of these offensive-minded head coaches. I consider Josh Heupel to be better than those two guys. I think Josh Heupel is more consistent than Lane Kiffin, at least in my opinion. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I
honestly agree with that. I think the Josh Heupel kind of negative stance that people are taking on him lately is because he was brought in and really introduced to the world as this guy's an offensive mastermind. Do you see what Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt are doing to defenses right now? They look like 2019 LSU. They're incredible. And since that moment, they've kind of been on a steady decline offensively. Their defense has gotten much better, exponentially better, to the point where their defense was the best part of their team this year. But when your face is known as, hey, this is Josh Heupel, the offensive-minded guy, people don't tend to look as much at your defense. So I think that's kind of why people are now assuming that Lane Kiffin and quarterback whisperer Jeff Brom are better than him. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I don't know if I agree with that.
All right. Greg also said this: Deion Sanders is better than this head coach that just made a playoff for the first time.
Deion Sanders is better than this head coach that just made a playoff for the first time. Give me Curt Cignetti.
Yes. Okay. Curt Cignetti was ranked right behind Deion Sanders on this top 25 list. I believe that Deion Sanders was 23 and Curt Cignetti was 25, if I remember correctly.
I don't hate this simply because Curt Cignetti so far, and I could be absolutely wrong standing here in 2025 of March, Curt Cignetti is a one-hit wonder right now. Mm-hmm. Now, Deion Sanders has kind of somewhat two hits that are exponentially less significant than Curt Cignetti. I mean, you took Indiana to a freaking playoff game, but we've all kind of talked about it, and we all kind of look at it. That Indiana playoff run's a little questionable. You got to play a really bad Michigan team when they were down. Everything else in the schedule was favorable to you. You went to Ohio State and lost like everyone predicted you would, but the loss wasn't that bad. Like, I think people look at that Indiana playoff run as kind of a, yeah, you made the playoff.
A blind squirrel finds a nut.
Something like that. Or just like do we really believe this? Now, Deion Sanders, on the other hand, came in Colorado, started out 2-0, 3-0, I believe, and then proceeded to lose like 7 of your last 8 games. But followed up in 2024, and you're a moderately better team. They won 7 games this year, 8 games. Like had a Heisman winner. I think the Travis Hunter and Shador being first-round selections is doing a lot of heavy lifting for Deion. I would love to see where this ranking is 3 years from now, to see what Curt Cignetti's done in Indiana and see where Colorado is. But as of now, honestly, I don't hate it.
I think, but like Curt Cignetti to me, like he's won everywhere he's gone. Like he's also won at James Madison prior to his stop at Indiana, and now he's having a lot of success at his current stop, making a playoff with the Indiana Hoosiers. I think that deserves a lot of emphasis on that. And obviously, Deion Sanders had success before he got to Colorado, and I think that maybe what Greg is taking into account here is where the Colorado football program was prior to his arrival to where it is now, to where they are relevant because he is there at the very least. But I mean, they've had good football players, certainly, and he's done a lot for that program. But I think if you asked a lot of people, I just think that Curt Cignetti has done a better job for a long time as opposed to what Deion Sanders did. I think we're rushing into this just a little bit because it is still relatively new of Deion Sanders being a head coach at one of these Power 4 football programs.
And in fairness to Greg McElroy, it's 23 and 25, correct?
It's 22 and 23.
22 and 23. You go to the top 25 at any week and you go, okay, that's team 22, that's team 23. Yeah, I see why they're there, but 23 could beat 22. So the rankings, when you get to that deep down the list, the margins become so thin that I don't think it really much that matters. What else do you have on it?
All right, I just want to get you to guess this one. Where do you think Lincoln Riley ranks?
Oh. So Lincoln Riley's on this list.
Lincoln Riley is in the top 25.
All right.
You think he would be outside?
I don't... No,
I understand he's had his fair share of struggles, but Lincoln Riley is definitely a top 25 head coach.
All right, give me Lincoln Riley at 21, hovering right above Deion, but
19. This is a guy that was consistently ranked inside of the top 10 head coaches in college football. I mean, probably even last year, if you would have asked this question to a lot of people, Lincoln Riley is still in the top 10, and now he's outside of the top 15. This guy's almost outside of the top 20. Now he's the 19th best head coach in college football. Okay. Not saying I really disagree, because the names in front of him, I kind of have a hard time arguing against. Like Shane Beamer is right ahead of him at 18.
Better.
I think if we're speaking of right now, Shane Beamer probably gets the nod. But if we're looking at this from a career standpoint, again, I understand USC not really doing a whole lot since Lincoln Riley has gotten there, other than Caleb Williams winning a Heisman. But I mean, it's still Lincoln Riley. The fact of what he's done in Oklahoma, and then even now.
But yeah, what he's done in Oklahoma is in the past. That's 5 years ago. I don't think
getting pretty distant from that.
I think this is judging today who are the best coaches. Lincoln Riley is not there.
And if it is that, then I have a hard time disagreeing with
this. This would be really tough. Where is Dabo Swinney on this list?
Dabo Swinney,
because it was constantly Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney. Who's 1, 2, or 3? Where Dabo Swinney falls on this would be very telling to what's
number 7.
Okay, I don't disagree with that necessarily, and I don't hate Lincoln Riley falling out far that much. I mean, Lincoln Riley's biggest knock against him, even when he was at his peak, was, yeah, you can beat up on a Big 12 schedule. Yeah, you've got a Heisman-winning quarterback. Your offense is really good. You're still going to lose to Kansas State inexplicably. You'll still lose to, a Kansas every now and then. And then you'll go into a playoff game and you'll get destroyed by a team that has actual substance. That was always a knock on him. You went out to the Pac-12 where, hey, you're going to be able to beat up on the Pac-12, and did not have any success there, to the point now where you're getting pushed around in the Big Ten. Did not have a good year, first year in that conference. So I totally get that. I mean, he's coaching for his job arguably this year. I know the buyout's probably too much, but
I don't hate Dabo at 7, but do you like him behind Kalen DeBoer? Because Kalen DeBoer is number 6 on this list. Because that's where I kind of gripe with this whole thing about we're just focusing on the most recent things that have happened for these head coaches, and then also for if it's in the entire careers.
Here's why I don't mind Kalen DeBoer being where he is. He, in the last 700 days, had the Washington Huskies playing in a national title game with a Heisman contending quarterback. That's more than Dabo Swinney's had. That's more than, Lincoln Riley's had. And if we're judging, obviously, his first year at Alabama was not very successful, and we judge that based on Alabama standards. He went 9-3. He beat a top 3 Georgia team at home. Like, there were a lot of good things to take away from that season, as ugly as it was. We know the Vanderbilt loss. We know the Jalen Miller issues. We know Michigan. All the uglies that you can take away from that season, there are still a lot of really good things to take away from year one with a program. Like, when you come into a program in year one, you have them ranked number 1 at any point in the season. I think that's an accomplishment. Now, you can lose to Vanderbilt the immediate week after. That's not great. You're going to get a lot of askance looks for that, and he's gotten it rightfully so. But I think Kalen DeBoer should be ranked higher than Dabo Swinney right now.
I'm going to disagree with that as of right now. I would still have Dabo Swinney ranked higher than Kalen DeBoer on my list. But outside of that, I think Greg nailed the top 5. He had Dan Lanning, Marcus Freeman, Steve Sarkisian, Ryan Day, and then Kirby Smart at number 1. I kind of feel like that's what I would have as my top 5 right now.
Kirby Smart number 1 makes sense. It's kind of the obvious pick. It's Kirby Smart has become Nick Saban in the sense of, you think, okay, who's the best coach in college football? It's very easily Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
Most active national titles, consistently competing in playoff games. He has not reached Saban level stats yet, but he is very clearly the number 1. All right. Do you want to do pressure gauge? Because I think this is going to be an interesting tie into this for a lot of top.
I would love to do college football pressure gauge.
So I'll let you introduce this segment since it was kind of your idea to come up with it. But
okay, so the premise is very simple. We're going to take 2 names. It can be a head coach, it can be a football player, or it can even be a college football team. But you take 2, one or the other, and you say which one is under the most pressure heading into this season. So, for example, the first one that I have on my list is Dylan Raiola or Matt Rule.
Oh, all right. This is not the direction I figured we'd be heading in. I think that Matt Rule is under more pressure simply for the fact that you've been at Nebraska longer. There is less of a, there's less of an expectation put on Dylan Raiola. Yeah, the freshman year wasn't as great as everyone thought, but everything Dylan Raiola does is a reflection to what you are as a head coach. If Dylan Raiola has a terrible season, people are still going to look at Matt Rule and say, hey, what's going on here? If Dylan Raiola doesn't, if Matt Rule has a great season, people aren't going to necessarily go to Dylan Raiola and go, hey, why did that happen? So I think that Matt Rule's under more pressure simply because he's been at that program longer. And by the way, he set expectations more. You're going into year 3 of Matt Rule, and he talked about this. We said it a couple weeks ago. We said year 3 is really the year for us when we get things rolling. So things have to turn around now for Matt Rule. I don't think Dylan Raiola is necessarily under that same expectation. There's pressure for him to improve. There's pressure for him to say, hey, 2024 wasn't really good. Let's have a better 2025. But I don't think that's as much pressure as what Rule's under.
Yeah, and I think that Raiola, if he were to have a worse season this year, or if he were to kind of have a similar stat line that he did last year, maybe not show too much improvement, which I don't think will happen. There's still time for him to redeem himself, whereas let's say year 2 doesn't work out for Raiola or Nebraska this year, and now you're in year 3 of Matt Rule. Things really haven't started to pick up with that program. There's less time for redemption for you there. Like, Raiola can play year 2 at Nebraska, have a down year, enter the transfer portal, go to another program, and be in a much better situation than he is now. Matt Rule, you're not in that similar situation where you can just pick up and leave everything behind you like nothing happened. And also, I agree with you, and what I was going to mention is that Matt Rule's success is tied in with what Dylan Raiola does. So there's a whole lot more pressure around him, because nothing gets a fan base more riled up than not only a 5-star player not working out with your program, but choosing to spend money on the wrong 5-star, or what people would say is the wrong 5-star. That'll really get a fan base fired up about you.
Oh, yeah. I want to go a different direction. I want to go 2 coaches who are kind of teetering on the brink of, hey, you might get fired this year. Who is under more pressure heading into 2025? Luke Fickell or Mike Norvell?
Oh, I would say, to me, it's kind of easy. I think it's Mike Norvell, because Luke Fickell, I still feel like there's time for him to figure things out. And this is Wisconsin, to where they haven't shown that there is a ceiling, or like they haven't shown what the peak of Florida State or what Wisconsin football looks like under Luke Fickell. I think Mike Norvell showed what the peak of Florida State football is, at least for the time being, of we can go undefeated in the ACC. We could or should have made a college football playoff and maybe played for a national title if our starting quarterback didn't get injured. So I'm going to say it's on Mike Norvell, because Luke Fickell has kind of been, in the middle of the pack in his conference, and he's still, like I said, still trying to figure things out at his new gig. And I feel like there's a lot more time, or I shouldn't say a lot of time, but there's still areas for him to grow as a head coach there. Whereas Mike Norvell, you just had your worst season. I mean, one of the program's worst seasons that they have ever seen, following that undefeated regular season record, to where you got to bounce back quick. Like this season, you have to show immediate improvements on both sides of the football, and you have to show that thing that was just like one blip on the radar. Like that wasn't anything that is going to remain consistent here. We're going to keep trekking along and get back to what Florida State was just a couple of years ago, and that you giving me this extension and all this money was certainly worth it, because this program isn't going anywhere just because of one bad year.
Yeah, I think Luke Fickell kind of benefits from the fact that there hasn't really been a successful season for him, because there have not been expectations and there has not been urgency around the Wisconsin program. It doesn't feel like in Madison, Wisconsin, like we have a very short time to win a national title. This is our window. If Luke Fickell isn't going to deliver to us, we need him out of here. That 13-0 season in Florida State really created some urgency around that fan base and those boosters in that program of, hey, we've got a national championship program. We need to start competing for them. And you follow that up with 2-10. That creates a lot of pressure for Mike Norvell to now, hey, we have to right this ship. I mean, 2-10 is the most fireable season I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think that Florida State last season was panic button, like can't hit this thing enough times to set the alarms off, to what Brooks is bringing up right now, like Fickell getting this Venable-ish, our friend Brett getting one of these extensions where it's not really an extension, but it's also a sign of like, hey, we still kind of believe in you. We want to give you some time to show and prove yourself.
We're at least trying to get the public to believe that.
Yeah,
we believe
maybe
in you.
Pump the brakes just a little bit, give you a little bit more time. We think that you might be the guy. Again, not really a whole lot of belief there, but still some belief where, I mean, Norvell, if you turn in another losing record season, it's going to be rough to bounce back from that. The only thing saving you now is that extension that you got and the mass amount of money. The next one I have on my list, Lenore Sellers or DJ Lagway.
Oh, this is a really good one, because they both have kind of similar expectations.
Very similar.
Of, hey, your first year with us where we saw action looked really good. You should be taking a massive step. I mean, they're two quote-unquote dark horse Heisman candidates at this point. I'm going to say DJ Lagway has more pressure simply because of the schedule. And I know South Carolina has a very hard schedule as well, but Florida is a program that is traditionally believed to, hey, we should kind of be competing for national titles. Not to say that South Carolina doesn't have that anymore. Shane Beamer, your coach, has been saying we expect to be a playoff team. This is tough, actually, because there are legitimate reasons for both teams to feel pressure. I'm going to say it's Lagway still, just because of what Lagway was when he came in. Lagway was supposed to be, hey, this guy is going to be either the one who saves Billy Napier's job or not. He ended up doing so. They ended up having a really good year after Graham Mertz got injured, really turning things around. DJ Lagway looked really good. Lenore Sellers this is a really raw talent. He's going to have time to develop. He's a freshman, but we've got enough stable pieces around him. I'm going to change my answer to Lenore Sellers. I'm changing my answers to Lenore Sellers simply because he's going to be asked to do that much more. All of the pillars that made South Carolina successful in 2024, for the most part, are gone. It is now Lenore Sellers' team after a year of experience. And you can say something similar for DJ Lagway, but I think Lenore Sellers is going to have a lot asked of him this year.
I think that there is a little bit more pressure on Lenore, not because of anything that he has done, but because of what South Carolina as a whole did last year. If you were in the conversation of making the college football playoff, if something different goes your way last season, you only have 2 losses, you probably are in the college football playoff. So now there's kind of this mindset and this expectation that we should be better at the quarterback position because Lenore is going to show growth, and he should get better by default of having another season as a starter in this conference. By default, we should be better. So therefore, we should be back in the college football playoff conversation, where I think people kind of have exceeding expectations at Florida, but this is also year 2 for DJ Lagway with Florida. He'll have another year after this. This could be Lenore's final season out South Carolina. This could be the final hoorah for him. He could go to the NFL this next year. I know NFL GMs are already waiting to get their hands on him. So I think there is more pressure on him just because of what people are kind of expecting out of South Carolina. But I think both of them also have a cop-out of, hey, the schedule's really tough. I think both teams have that going for them. And so maybe if there were a down year, you could see some of the excuses or some of the reasoning behind why there were some struggles. But I think that they certainly both have some type of pressure on them, but more so on Lenore's because there's pressure around, hey, we got to try and make sure we make ourselves a first-round draft pick. Like, we really got to solidify this. We got to protect the football more. And I think that Lenore's, despite the fact that they do return some key pieces last year, I think he might have to play a hero ball a little bit more this year than even he did last year because they lost some key pieces offensively. I mean, it's Nick Harbor, the wideout, that people are really focusing on, but this is year 3 or whatever it is of people saying, oh, this is the breakthrough year for Nick Harbor. This is the one for it to happen. I mean, we've been saying that for a while, so that's not even like a surefire thing. And then you lose Raheem Sanders. So I think there's going to be a lot more on Lenore Sellers' shoulders this year for South Carolina than maybe there will be for DJ Lagway.
Yeah, the correct answer is Lagway, but it's so marginally thin simply because of the expectations are kind of similar. Like, hey, this is going to be a much better year for us despite the fact that the schedule is hard. Shane Beamer's job security isn't as much in question as Billy Napier's, but I don't think that DJ Lagway is necessarily concerned with, hey, I'm playing for Billy Napier's job. So it's an interesting one. Next one I have is, who is under more pressure heading into 2025? Steve Sarkisian or Dan Lanning?
Ooh. Almost like a net neutral for me.
Yeah, it's two coaches that have competed in the realm of national titles, have made it to the conference championships, but have come just that close, are losing their starting quarterbacks. But it's an interesting one.
I think that, honestly, my answer to this is probably going to root more in what the fan base thinks and expects. And I think that Texas fans are expecting a lot more around that football program right now than maybe what Oregon fans are, or at least like the urgency that they're expecting things to happen, and the urgency of a national title should be coming to us soon, partially because of who you have at quarterback. You have Arch Manning going to be your starter this year, and you've gotten close several times now under Sarkisian of making a national title game, so it feels like you're just that close. You just got to break through that wall, and you'll finally get there. Maybe Arch Manning is the answer to that, whereas for Oregon, I think they're kind of sad. They're obviously satisfied with the job that Dan Lanning has done, and they know that they're going to make the playoff this year because their schedule's cake, and they have one of the most talented rosters in the country, and Dan Lanning's recruiting his butt off consistently, getting in top 5 classes every single year, so there's no issues there, where it feels like the timer is running out a little quicker for Steve Sarkisian to finally get over that last hurdle and finally get a national title, where I think Dan Lanning could go a year or two more without doing that, and Oregon fans are still going to feel confident in the job that he's doing and have no worries about it, where Steve Sarkisian goes the next 2 years, or even 1 year with Arch Manning as your quarterback, and nothing really comes out of it. I think there's a lot of questions that are surrounding you at that point of, man, we had Quinn Ewers, who was a 5-star quarterback out of high school, couldn't get the job done. We got a Manning in this program. We couldn't get the job done there. Well, what is it going to take for us to win a national title here at Texas under Steve Sarkisian?
Yeah, the Arch Manning aspect of it definitely does add more to the Steve Sarkisian plate because he is expected to be the next greatest quarterback in college football. It just comes with the name. It's not necessarily fair, but you knew what you were signing up for when you recruited him. So I do think that the fact that Sark has been able to make some runs, like they made a somewhat pretty deep run to the playoff. They were in the Final Four. They were this close to winning their conference championship, beating Georgia. Like they made it to the SEC championship their first year. Now, granted, Dan Lanning and Oregon did similar, pretty much all of the same things in the Big Ten. But I do kind of wonder if that playoff run helps Sark's odds just a little bit more. Because you look at Dan Lanning, other than the Ohio State win in the regular season and the Penn State win, which turned out to, might not have been as great a performance as we thought it was, a lot of people in the common knock on Dan Lanning was, he's got to be able to win the big game. I don't think there's pressure on him as much this year, but let's just say hypothetically Oregon drops a game that they're not supposed to in this cakewalk of a regular season schedule. Like we've all sat here, the three of us.
It almost happened in week 1 last year.
Exactly.
They were on the ropes.
And you've got a lot of transfers coming in. You've got a new quarterback in Dante Moore, who we'll get to later, but does not have the same game experience as a Dylan Gabriel or Bo Nix did. So I think it could be interesting. Right now, Steve Sarkisian is the correct answer. But let
instance. I'll give you another similar one. What about Arch Manning or Drew Aller?
Arch Manning.
Really?
Here's why, and I get that Drew Aller has all of a sudden had national title odds placed on him and expectations of that, and hey, this is your 18th year in the program, you should be playing the top-notch football that you have, and there's a lot of pressure to deliver. Arch Manning is not only playing for his career, his legacy, he's playing for his name. If you are Arch Manning and you don't ball out at Texas, or you have a subpar year and you kind of don't live up to the hype, it all becomes, you all of a sudden become the ugly duckling in a 60-year dynasty of quarterback play. Your grandpa played incredible. Your uncles are Hall of Famers, even though Eli's not in it currently. Like Super Bowl winning champions. And then here's you, all of a sudden, a guy who was recruited heavily out of high school, was a 5-star, didn't get a start, didn't earn the starting job till your third year when the guy ahead of you left, and here you are, and it didn't really go the way you thought it would. Like, Arch Manning is under immense pressure. For as much as Penn State fans are going, hey, Drew Aller should be playing his best football this year, I don't think that's too much to ask, whereas you are trying to uphold a 60-year name, college football royalty. Like Brooks said it, they are the Kennedys of football. The most recognizable name, spans over 60 years, decades-long royalty. If you don't live up to that, that is immense pressure to put on a kid who is 19, 20 years old.
Yeah, I guess it's like, I mean, Arch Manning right now does kind of feel like what people were doing to LeBron when he was coming out of high school,
Yes.
of like, this is going to be the family of Peyton Manning and Eli Manning. You immediately get a picture in your mind of how good of a football player that is going to be and what that should look like on Saturdays on a college football field. So there's just immense amount of pressure on him to deliver these expectations that people have put on him. It's not even about expectations of what he should do necessarily with the program. It's just a matter of, if Arch Manning throws for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, but Texas makes the first round of the playoff and loses, people aren't disappointed in Arch Manning, but they're disappointed in Texas. Where I think Drew Aller, it's more so about him finally putting all the pieces together, because people are saying he's supposed to be a first round draft pick next year, and we still haven't quite seen the consistency out of this.
Yeah, I definitely think they're both under a good amount of pressure. I just think it's Arch way more. Mm-hmm. My final one, Josh Heupel or Brian Kelly, two coaches that came in kind of hot, came in swinging. Obviously, Heisman the next year with Jaden Daniels, but since then they've kind of been on a steady decline. Who do you think's in more pressure right now?
Brian Kelly, probably. I just because Josh Heupel at least has some recency to his program success, and he's had a lot more recent success, or I shouldn't say a lot more, but he's had more recent success than Brian Kelly has. And Brian Kelly came to LSU to elevate this program and get it out of the mud after what Ed O did to it after he won a national title. And you've seen the signs that he has obviously brought that program back up, and he made an SEC championship game, but there hasn't been a playoff appearance. It kind of feels like they fell short. Even with a Heisman winning quarterback, they weren't able to do it. And there's been so many shortcomings of Brian Kelly at LSU so far, like losing week 1 games consistently and immediately putting yourself behind the rest of the pack before conference play even starts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an alarming sign so far, but Heupel at least, and the thing too is like, I think Heupel's done a better job with lesser talented rosters than maybe what Brian Kelly has had to work with, and he's done more with that so far. And I think just the fact that Tennessee made the college football playoff last year, I know it ended in an abysmal way, and there was a lot of, not necessarily doubt, but there was definitely some harsh feelings to the way that went. But again, he at least...
We've been ranked number 1 we've had years. That's unheard of for Tennessee head coaches. They went like 17 straight games without beating them. There's all of these things that Tennessee fans are expecting, hey, this is going to be the year we do it. And I know they've been somewhat quiet this year, as have all the fan bases. But I look on the other side of the aisle, I think Brian Kelly could get away with a 9-3 season. And you lose a close game, you might have a disappointing showing, but for the most part, you're a competitive top 15 team throughout the year. I think if Tennessee misses the playoff this year, they're going to be very, very upset with Josh Heupel.
Yeah,
and I'm going to give him more pressure that way. I understand that Brian Kelly might have more questions around him. There might be more, hey, Brian, it's year 4. It's time to really get this thing going, really get things on track here. But I think Josh Heupel's expectations, because of what he's been able to do, are higher right now. And Tennessee fans, we know, can be one of the fan bases that if you're not meeting the expectations, they will find a way to get you out. Maybe McDonald's will come through again with a paper bag, and well, it's not going to happen anymore because it's legal. Sorry, Jeremy Pruitt.
Guys, we're aware that there's some issues going on with YouTube right now. Again, we do believe that it is YouTube because everything on our end looks clean. There's no freezes going on our screen. The connection looks good. We're not getting any warnings. The best thing I can tell you to do is just keep refreshing, closing out the app, and sticking with us because we do have a lot more great content left on the show sheet, and we have the local hour coming up. So we apologize for any issues that YouTube is giving you, but please, we just encourage you guys to keep sticking with us and having fun like we are. So again, sorry for the inconveniences that are occurring. Did you have any more?
No, that was all. The ops are opping, obviously.
Praying on our downfall, man. That's
really
unfortunate. We came out strong the first time doing the solo show for the first time this year, and YouTube was like, whoa.
Too good.
Too much of a heater going on over here. We got to dim those numbers down a little bit.
I'm going to put a tinfoil hat on. Do you think Brooks has something to do with it?
He wouldn't do that to us.
You think he's like, the boys are cooking too much? I need people to think that they're not all that.
Maybe it's Greg McElroy. Maybe him and Paul Feinbaum are in cahoots.
Maybe Paul Feinbaum's like,
you hear these jamokes over here making segments, making fun of us? And no, this can't be happening. Maybe they're the ones pulling the plug on us.
Let's make fun of some more segments. ESPN, quote unquote, asked around the college football world for who the best quarterback in the sport was heading into the season. And the list is shocking, to say the least. I'll first start off by saying this. I do think this year in particular, there is not a star-studded name that has in-game experience where you can say, that's the best quarterback in college football. I know everyone wants to throw Arch Manning's name out there. Arch Manning has like 3.5 starts under his belt. Like, there's no one with more than 10 starts that has this star power. Nevertheless, though, the names on this list are interesting, Jay Will.
The name at the top was certainly interesting. Cade Klubnik, ranked as the number 1 quarterback. Now, I believe this list is it's Adam Rittenberg's rankings, but it's also based off of some of the opinions that he got of other college football coaches. And Cade Klubnik, number 1. Now, I completely get it. He had a big year last year for Clemson. He led them to a college football playoff appearance, and he won an ACC title with the Clemson Tigers, and he's returning for another year. And it feels like there's been steady growth with Klubnik over his time as a starter for Clemson. Especially if you just go from week 1 against Georgia last year to the final week of the season, I think those are two completely different football players. Now, you could say it's because of the talent that he was facing, but I mean, week 1 was against an SEC team. The final game of his season last year was also against an SEC team, and he played really well. He was really the only reason why they were still in that game. Phil Maffa banged up, really wasn't 100%. He didn't go. So I think that Cade Klubnik definitely has a lot of potential to be the best quarterback. But when I think of the top quarterback in college football, I think of a guy that is just going to absolutely dominate the landscape. Like, he's going to be head above shoulders better than everybody else. And maybe there isn't one of those this year, but I think there is going to be one, and I don't really see Cade Klubnik being that.
No, and here's the issue I have with this list, and obviously there are metrics and rankings that go into it. So the way it's set out is they list Cade Klubnik, they list his season, they list his stats, and then they list some quotes from fellow coaches who remain anonymous about Cade Klubnik. Here's a quote. He's got a ton of experience, so I think he'll do an excellent job. Just like any quarterback, he's been through the struggles, the ups and downs. I thought he finished well and played well for the most part. He's got a good team around him. That, to me, doesn't read like a coach saying that's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And let me give you more quotes. He's played a lot. I don't know if he's an NFL guy or a first or second rounder, but he's gotten a lot better decision-making wise. This is the supposed number 1 quarterback in college football right now. Not that I think Cade Klubnik's bad, not that I don't think he deserves to get some praise for the way he closed out that 2024 season. The best coming into the year, is that the best option we have, or is it just, hey, here's a guy who has the most experience that didn't completely suck at the end of the year, who is coming back? Like, he's one of the most improved passers in the country, and he's defensive coordinator Ed. I know he was gritty, a competitor, but the passing got really better last year. Gritty in a competitor isn't necessarily what you look for.
Pail.
Yeah, like, fine quarterback, easily in the top 15, probably in the top 10, but gritty and a competitor and really improve, but I don't know if he's a first or second rounder. It doesn't strike to me as, hey, this is the best quarterback in college football right now.
Like, especially if we did this in a draft scenario, like where every single college football team is going to draft a quarterback or a future starting quarterback for this next season. Who's the number one pick on the board? It's not Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik is not the first name that you're going to be hearing this season. It might be a DJ Lagway. It might be a Lenore Sellers. And I think that was even mentioned in DJ Lagway's little profile that Rittenberg did on here. And he was ranked 10th overall. And he's at the top of my list. If I was going right now voting for a Heisman guy, it would probably be DJ Lagway over Arch Manning. He's going to be their team. They're going to go as he is going. That's kind of further proof to me of, again, in this situation of Cade Klubnik would not be the first quarterback taken in this quote-unquote college football draft.
No, here's quotes for Drew Aller, the guy he's ranked one above. Everybody I talked to said he's going to be a first-round draft pick a year from now. I watched the tape and I thought we saw better players, but after playing him, I was impressed with how he's able to handle himself. Even that, but at least they're talking about, hey, this is a first-round quarterback. When you're talking about Cade Klubnik and it's like, he might be a second-rounder? I don't know if he's an NFL guy, but it's... And again, these are lists set to completely fill time in the offseason, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. I do think that one that was worth noting, and one that's kind of going under the radar, Sam Leavitt at 6. Had a really, really good year at Arizona State. Made a lot of plays in that Big 12 championship. Had a good game against Texas.
Great game against Texas.
Made a couple of really big plays down the stretch there. Obviously, weren't able to finish it all the way. Had a comeback, but came up short in overtime. But Sam Leavitt, I think, is a name where it's like, oh, damn, he's doing numbers this year.
I think the thing with Sam Leavitt is, and this is what you do with programs like Arizona State, is you don't really necessarily worry about what Leavitt is going to do this year, but you kind of worry about what the pieces around him are going to allow him to do this year. It's just kind of a touch and go thing with things, especially with a program like Arizona State that made the college football playoff last year. But I don't know if those same expectations are around that program, considering some of the pieces that they lost. Having your starting quarterback come back definitely alleviates some of that, but I think it really does have more so to do with what is around him that's going to allow. Are those pieces around him going to allow him to be the 6th best quarterback in college football? I don't know the answer to that, but I do think he's extremely talented.
Having Cam Scatterbo in your backfield definitely helped your case and took a lot of load off for you. So he's one of these players that's going to be asked to do a lot more this year. Here's one that Georgia fans were waiting for.
I love this one for one reason only. It's Carson Beck at number 7. I liked this piece because it only further confirmed to me that college football coaches are just as conflicted about Carson Beck as all the viewers of college football, all the fans are. Because in one of these quotes from a college football coach, it says, he showed good pocket awareness. He can make every throw in the football field. I think he's a great decision maker. And it talks about the interceptions, but he doesn't think that those define who Carson Beck is as a quarterback. Of course, they mentioned how they didn't think that Georgia's wide receivers were up to par that they usually are. And then there's also a quote from an ACC coach that says, never made me go, wow. I think that just proves that he is just a conflicting person. He's a conflicting football player. Nobody is ever going to think the same thing about Carson Beck, no matter what he does, because even college football coaches can't really agree on what Carson Beck is, because I think if you talk about Carson Beck as a decision maker and as a football player, and we've even discussed this of, he's not really one of these wow players. That's not what his game is. His game is making the right decisions, usually. He didn't really showcase that too much last year, but it's usually playing on time, making the right decisions, and keeping the ball out of risk. That's what you saw for the entire 2023 season. And it's not really going to make you go, wow, because that is boring. But one coach thinks that he makes every throw on the football field. The other one thinks, he's all right.
Who are some players that you think are going to kind of pop or flop this year? So like in a pop, they're going to live up to the hype, they're going to exceed expectations, or they're going to kind of go under the radar until they start playing games and we're going to go, where the hell did that guy come from? As opposed to flop, where it's off-season hype all the way train right now, and then you get to the regular season, it's going to be kind of like, well, they didn't really live up to the hype.
I got 2 SEC quarterbacks as my biggest pop this year. Number 1, Austin Simmons is the quarterback for Ole Miss, the one that came in for a drive against Georgia, marched Ole Miss right down the field, scored a touchdown, and then came off the field, and Jackson Dart went back into the game. But I think that this is going to be a pop because, 1, I do think that Ole Miss is going to see some regression this year. May not see it receive as much as attention as they did last year, just because, they lost a lot of bodies on the defense. I don't think they're going to be as stout as they were up front on the defensive line. So I think that if you are going to find some type of light on Ole Miss's roster this year, and you're going to, especially offensively when Lane Kiffin is calling the shots, I think that Austin Simmons is going to have a successful year. And I think he's going to be a major talking point heading into next season. That's more so where this pop is going to be coming from, is by the end of the year, when you're talking about heading into the 2026 season, who are some of the top quarterbacks in the conference, Austin Simmons is going to be in this discussion.
I like that a lot because I do think that
we're a little Canadian right there. I
was thanks for pointing that out, man. Thanks, man. Now I'm insecure. No, I was saying I don't think that we've had a year where you come into a season and the Lane Kiffin quarterback system is kind of like,
yeah.
Like there's always, Ole Miss has solid quarterback play. It was Matt Corral, it was Jackson Dart. They always seem to have just a really good answer there. People aren't really giving Austin Simmons the same treatment, and I think he has the potential to be a very, very solid player. Mm-hmm. Like you said, that drive against Georgia, very impressive.
Yeah, I think it's almost like Georgia fans were like, get Jackson Dart back in the game. Get the guy that just threw the interception. Don't let that guy come back on the field, because then we're deep shit. Well, you were in it regardless.
Yeah, that was
and then my other one, Ty Simpson. This purely is based off of the offseason disrespect that this man is getting, and I think that it's going to be a bit of a fresh air for Alabama fans to watch this quarterback play for them this year. I do think he's going to be the starter, and I think that watching a quarterback playing within the system and in a system that he is molded for, I think is going to, again, be some type of alleviation for Alabama fans, considering what you watched last year with Jalen Milroe, where it was either Jalen Milroe was running for 45 yards or he's throwing a 70-yard bomb, or it's a bunch of WTF throws. Like, what the heck is going on here? Very inconsistent. I think you're going to get consistent quarterback play with Ty Simpson, and it's going to be a pop because it's like, oh, Kalen DeBoer has a quarterback. Oh, Alabama has consistent quarterback play. This is what we thought was missing from last year's team. I think it's going to be a pop for them, and people are going to be talking positively about him.
I think the pop is going to come in the statistics. I don't think Ty Simpson is going to make the Jalen Milroe-like plays. It's like, my God, this guy's superhuman. But I do think we'll get to the end of a football game. It's like, oh, Ty Simpson completed 70% of his balls for nearly 300 yards. Like, this is Alabama has their quarterback. Kalen DeBoer has their guy. But, like, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the Jalen Milroe 75-yard bomb or 50-yard scramble. I have KC Concepcion as one of the guys who's going to be a pop this year. He was the shining, and I mean the only bright spot on North Carolina State's offense last year. Obviously, for a lot of reasons, did not have the year they needed. He transferred to Texas A&M, and I am buying that stock a lot. I think that they are going to have a lot of fun with him on that talent. He's a talented guy, and I really see this as being, getting that SEC attention. There's a lot of really good players in the ACC that don't get loved simply because the teams they're on are going 7-5, and you don't really know about them unless they're storylines or you just love college football that much. He's a guy that's going to introduce himself to a lot of players nationally.
Yeah, last year for Concepcion, it was Week 1, oh, watch out for this wideout at NC State. Oh, damn, they lost by 70 to Tennessee. Don't talk about him anymore. He's in the dust. Like that's kind of how last season went for him. NC State was an afterthought, and he didn't get much love. Now that he's back in the S, or not back in the SC, but now that he is back with what people believe might be a contending team, certainly a good spotlight on him, and I think you will see a pop in his stock.
And I'll be quick on this when I talk about Miller. Sam Levitt, I think, is another guy that kind of introduced himself to the nation, the way he played in the Big 12 and Cotton Bowl. It was the Cotton Bowl, right? No, it was the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Either way, playoff game. Really introduced himself well, and I think he's kind of got potential to build on that, especially with how open the Big 12 is. He's shown that he can make good decisions. It's not that he was supplemented by what Cam Scatterbo did. It helped a lot, but he's got a good receiver core as well, so I'm buying him as a pop.
All right, biggest flop. Jackson Arnold, transfer quarterback at Alabama. Things already didn't go too well, and I don't know if this is necessarily a big flop because...
You mean Auburn?
I don't know that this is necessarily a big flop for him because the stock on him right now isn't really high. I don't think people are buying a whole lot of it. I don't think there's a whole lot of believers in him, but more so a flop in a new destination for you was not the solution to this, because I think the destination that you chose might be setting you up for failure, considering what happened last year with Peyton Thorne at quarterback for Auburn and the type of offense that Hugh Freeze is running, where it's a whole bunch of RPO. You can make bad decisions very frequently. You can make horrible turnovers, and the finger gets pointed on you, and you're taking the blame. And when your head coach is doing that from a guy that last season didn't go too well for you at Oklahoma last year, and things are a little shaky on you, I think the floor can fall right out from underneath of you very quickly if you're Jackson Arnold this year at Auburn.
Jackson Arnold is going to have tire tracks the size of a Greyhound bus along his back by week 5 or 6 of this season. Like, it's just going to happen. He's mistake prone enough, and Hugh Freeze, obviously, when you make mistakes, goes, Wasn't me. I didn't. This
idiot.
This guy
you should
sucks.
ask him.
So yeah, I definitely think he's probably going to be a flop. Another flop I have is Lenora Sellers. I think, and we talked about this earlier, yes, he's going to be very talented. I think people have kind of chosen to ignore the turnover issues he had. Now, he cleaned it up towards the end of the season. They lost so much. He's going to be expected to do that much more. When more responsibilities are put on your hand as a quarterback, when you're expected to make more throws, more runs, more plays, you are more likely to have turnovers. I think that is probably the biggest red flag for Lenora Sellers this year. He's going to make a lot of plays, but I don't think he's going to be this Heisman contending, otherworldly talent that people are expecting him to be right now. So I'm going to go, he's a flop.
I kind of don't hate it, to be honest. I'm not saying that I think that Lenoris is going to be bad this year, but I just think of what people are expecting 2025 to look like for him in South Carolina. I think that the mark that they hit this year might be a little bit below that, and people are going to deem it a little bit as a disappointment.
The thing I've noticed about college football fans, and just fans in general, we can end it on this, it's never down. There's never a, hey, they're going to get worse this year as a player. It's the expectation is from year to year you get better. And I understand why it's the expectation, but that's not the reality for a lot of these players. A lot of players, take steps back. There are some regressions. Carson Beck is a prime example of this, where in 2023 it was like, this guy never makes the wrong decision. Well, he did that a lot in 2024. I think Lenoris is a guy who, if he does get better, is going to be a very, very, very good quarterback in the SEC and the nation. But the reality is, I'm just not necessarily buying with the roster that you're losing, with the schedule that you have, with everything that's going to be asked of you this year, that you are going to progress as much as the rest of the world thinks you are.
My last one, and we'll end it on this one. Malik Murphy, it might already be a flop. We went from Duke to Oregon State. Might have already flopped on that one, but I got to put you on my list because I was kind of hopeful for you when you went to Duke, and now we're at Oregon State.
You just love the Dukies, man. You can't.
All right. We got a whole nother hour coming up. We'll see you in the local hour.
Welcome into Talk the Dog, the show where we find a bone to pick and a take to give. These are not hot takes. These is dog takes. Can I talk that dog? What's up? You like that? You really like that? Let's shut up and grab some tape.
I like how it's got like two folds for. I was looking at the wipes.
Do you need them?
I hope not.
Shout out to Mando. We appreciate those guys for supporting us. All right, welcome to the local hour. Some say it is our best hour. For the first thing we're going to talk about, though, just a quick news hitter right here. Ra Thomas, former Georgia wide receiver, former Mississippi State wide receiver, is now found a transfer destination after his time in Athens. Is going to be going to Troy.
There's not a lot to say. We know the situation around Ra Thomas. All I'll say is, I hope he makes the most of this new opportunity that he's been given. And I'm not necessarily talking about on the football field. And I'll just leave it at that. So wish him well. Not much more needs to be said there.
I think that's the best way we could put it right there. All right, let's get into the meat of this show of ours right here.
Pause.
Dang it. I almost made the whole week without getting a pause from you because you're always giving Brooks out there, hey, oh, man.
I've out of fear of disrupting the flow of the show because I know it's just you and me there. And typically you can throw a pause out and he doesn't hear it half the time because, he talks so loud and we're not in each other's ear. But that one I had to hit that one. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, recruiting college football insider Steve Wiltfong claims that the Dogs are ready to spin big this recruiting class. I believe he said that they're going, what was the phrase that he used?
To let it rip.
Let it rip.
Yeah, so obviously over time, and especially in the era of this NIL, where it seems like everywhere you look, recruits getting $1 million, Georgia has kind of been one of these few teams that say, we don't pay you. We pay you in the way you get developed. We pay you in the way that you get paid when you get to the league. Look at all these contracts we have. Look at all these first-round draft picks we have. There's kind of the quote-unquote Kirby Smart discount that you get for not having to shell out all these gobs of money. They don't get in bidding wars. They don't say, oh, they offered you this much. We'll double that. This is what we're offering. They don't do that. However, it seems like as 2026 approaches, and according to Steve Wiltfong, they're going to be much more willing to spend money.
Now, why is this significant news necessarily? I think it's significant for this recruiting class specifically that they're doing this. And I believe that previously, like last year, there was kind of this headline floating around that Georgia thrifted their roster last year with the guys that they brought in through the transfer portal and the additions that they made, kind of talking about this Kirby Smart discount. Maybe they didn't spend as much money as some of the other top dogs in college football. But now it sounds like they are going to be one of the big spenders this year. But it's significant this year because, and we got into this conversation on the show, talking about Jared Curtis, the number 1 overall quarterback, deciding between Georgia and Oregon. If he does ultimately choose Georgia, everybody kind of knows it's going to be a pricey tag attached to his name. It's going to cost a lot of money. Could that possibly hinder with what they're going to be able to do with the rest of the class? Could you get Tyler Atkinson as well? Could you get Mark Bowman as well, the tight end out of California? Could you get all these other top-rated prospects? Caden Prothro, another tight end from the state of Georgia. Could you get these other prospects along with getting the number 1 quarterback in the country, or are you going to have to allocate those resources there, and it might be Jared Curtis and maybe just Tyler Atkinson or just Mark Bowman or whoever it is? This kind of makes it seem like telling Georgia fans, hey, even if we do get Jared Curtis, you don't have to worry about that because we are expecting to have to spend big this class, and we are ready to do so.
Now, I do think that obviously Jared Curtis is going to take up a large portion of this quote-unquote budget that Georgia's going to have to let it rip, whatever that means. I do think that it also means that they are just going to spend more in general. Probably one, because I think this is also something we need to look at. Rev share is coming down the pipe. We don't know when it is. We don't know when it's going to be enacted, but I do feel like you're getting a sense of, as much from recruits as you are teams, of, hey, like, this is kind of the last opportunity you have to say, this is my price, this is what I want, and make it as high as you want, because it's pretty soon Deloitte's going to be coming in. Other these third-party revenue streams are going to be looking at and saying, hey, this isn't fair price for this. You're paying too much for this quarterback. This is fair price for this. And college football players aren't going to be making nearly as much. Obviously, there will be under-the-table deals, and there will still be bagman coming through. But it does feel like this is the last year of the wild, wild west, where, hey, do whatever you want, pay how much ever you want, ask for whatever you want. And it seems like Georgia's like, you know what? We'll play. Let's see how good of a roster we can get.
I'll tell you one thing. You got to make sure you let it rip in the right place, because if you do it in the wrong place, people are pointing fingers at you. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. You're doing it in the right place. People forget that you let it rip and that they're just focused on all the other glorious things that came along instead.
I don't know what this is a reference to.
You don't? Okay. Guy doesn't get humor. Anyways, good news
I thought
for
you were
Georgia.
doing a Mando read, honestly.
Oh, no, I was not doing a Mando read.
But honestly, if you do let it rip and something comes out of it, Mando wipes will be there to help you. So
you just smell them fresh again.
40% off if you use code FGN. That's shopmando.com. 2 reads in one show, dude. How about us?
Just elite.
Do you want to introduce kind of, not a new segment, but a temporary segment?
A temporary segment?
So, since it's just me and Jay Will today, and obviously Brooks has the majority of the ball knowledge, but me and Jay will have, I would say, a much better understanding and a much more deep-driven history of the Georgia football program over the last 15 years. Yes, Brooks has been tapped in since 2019, but I don't think he necessarily remembers all the pain and suffering and highs and lows that we've been through as Georgia Bulldogs fans. So we've got the spinning wheel, and we're going to spin it, and it's just going to bring up a random game from the past, and we'll kind of just go briefly talk about that. Do that in between segments. So, Jay, we'll let it spin real quick.
Let's spin that wheel.
We've got okay.
I don't know where that's landing. There's no lines.
It's landing on 2013 LSU. So this is obviously the classic number 6 versus number 9 in Athens. Zach Mettenberger versus Aaron Murray. Georgia was just coming off of a win against North Texas, I believe. Had a very, very big win against South Carolina to start the year. Lost to Clemson in week 1. But that was one of the first Georgia games where, under the Mark Richt era, was like, we finally beat a top 10 team.
I want to ask you, what are the 2 plays you remember most from this game? Because there's 2 that, when you say 2013 LSU, Athens, Georgia, I have two plays that immediately pop into my mind.
There's a bunch of plays that stick out to me from this play. I'll list off a couple. Odell Beckham one-handing the kickoff.
Okay, that wasn't on my list.
In the end zone,
yes.
insane. I remember the Jarvis Landry first touchdown in the West end zone. I remember that. Obviously, the Justin Scott Wesley touchdown.
Okay, that was one of mine.
To take the lead. I remember Todd Gurley rolling his ankle. That scared me. And then the one I remember most is the fourth down play, Jordan Jenkins jumping over the left tackle.
I thought it was Leonard Floyd.
It was Jordan Jenkins. Leonard Floyd was coming up the B gap.
I thought it was because I could have swore it was.
I'm almost positive it's Jordan Jenkins. I could go back.
But,
I could be wrong. Chat, correct me on that.
Regardless, funny enough that we both have two of the same plays that pop in our mind, because every time I think about that fourth down play, I just envision Jenkins or Floyd at this point jumping over the left tackle, or we're gonna get this guy down. Like, it didn't make the sack or didn't make the play, but I was just like, that's freaking nuts.
Got a whoa from Gary Danielson.
Oh yeah,
one of my favorite things was when Gary would just go mid play, like whoa, like he was
Burns in the middle calling the play. Whoa, oh my gosh!
We're like, oh no, he's wide open.
And then the cursed. But there's a flag after a big play. Oh, those are always killer.
I'm gonna miss Gary. I don't care what people say about him. But no, that's just a fun little thing we'll do throughout the show. Just kind of different spins and reliving different Georgia games. Moving on to the next segment, though. Georgia so Matt Miller did a mock draft today, and he took the liberty of doing all 257 picks. Now, obviously, 7
How
rounds.
long do you think that takes?
I guarantee by like the 5th round, just like, all right.
Yeah, I could go ahead and tell you, if someone asked me to do a full 7-round mock draft, there's getting to a point where I'm just,
bro, I don't even do
this player.
I don't even do full drafts when I like play on franchise mode.
Right, you get the first 2 picks.
I get to like round 2, it's like, all right, auto
draft, whatever, screw this.
So yeah, shout out to Matt Miller, but figured it'd be a fun way to just go through and list the type of players that are getting taken. First Georgia player for the 8th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers select Jalen Walker. Kind of what we figured. He's been hovering around that 8 or 9 zone. Kind of, is he going to go to the Saints? Is he going to go to the Raiders even at 6? But I feel like that's the appropriate fit for Jalen Walker.
You had to throw in the Raiders there, didn't you? Just had to make sure, like, hey, my team's interested.
And we can go ahead and take this time. You saw an interesting take that some people have Jalen Walker ranked higher than Abdul Carter.
Yeah, this is Mike Mayock apparently said that he had a higher draft grade on Jalen Walker than he does Abdul Carter. Now, Abdul Carter, top 5 draft pick. This guy had an immaculate season with Penn State, especially in the playoffs. Just an absolute game wrecker. And I think it is important to kind of differentiate here that Abdul Carter is ranked is positioned as an edge, Jalen Walker as a linebacker. But he said that he has a higher draft grade on Jalen Walker, and I love these quotes that he gave about him. He said, I put the Georgia tape on of Jalen Walker, and he's an off-ball linebacker, 243 pounds, and my jaw dropped watching him run. His twitch, his quickness, his speed, his change of direction. But what really intrigued me is on sub packages, Rich. They put him everywhere from the A-gap over the center to all the way outside as a pass rusher. And I have in my notes all over the place for Jalen Walker. Every tape I watch, I have Micah Parsons. He reminds me of so much of Micah Parsons when he came out of Penn State. This is the last part. The last part, though, is what I think really hammers home what Jalen Walker is as a prospect. He said, I think the only limitation is a defensive coordinator with lack of creativity, because this kid can play all over the ball. And if you have to chase a guy like Jaden Daniels on the field, this is the kid I want doing it. So the first thing, the one limitation is a defensive coordinator without creativity. If you're taken back to last preseason, you can remember Kirby Smart saying that Jalen Walker made the coaching staff uncomfortable. Or this is after the Clemson game, actually. He said that he made us uncomfortable because we had to play him. We just didn't know where we were going to play him. So we had to find roles for Jalen Walker to make sure that we got him onto the football field and put him at all these different spots to make sure that we are maximizing the player that Jalen Walker is. So if you do get an NFL team that just drafts Jalen Walker and is like, oh, off-ball linebacker, stay right here the entire game, probably not going to get the most out of Jalen Walker, where if you utilize him in so many different spots, that's where he's best.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes him such a polarizing prospect is the upside of Jalen Walker. I don't know why you want to say Carter. The upside of Jalen Walker is so high that you get a Swiss Army knife on the field that there really isn't anything he can't do. But the risk is that he's not good at just one thing, and you have to be able to use that to his ability, because otherwise he's not going to be your best off-ball linebacker. He's not going to be your best sole pass rusher. You have to find a way to use him so that it maximizes his potential, because otherwise you're going to be kind of wasting a pick and wasting his talent, which I think there's such a big risk of that it might not necessarily, pay off for him in a way.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I was going to say is I think that reason is also why he isn't going to be drafted as highly as Abdul Carter, because it is really, and you say this with all prospects, but I think it is of uber importance for Jalen Walker of making sure that he lands in the right spot and he goes to the right team. So if that is at 8th overall, or if that is at 15th overall, or if it is at 17th, like whatever it is, you just want to make sure that he goes to the right spot because that's where he's going to have the most success. And then also the last part where he said, and if you have to chase a guy like Jaden Daniels on the field, this is the kid I want doing it. I think that just speaks to how much his game translates to the modern day game of it is guys like Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts or even guys like Josh Allen, these mobile quarterbacks, these more athletic quarterbacks that all these teams are picking up to where you need a guy like Jalen Walker that can chase him down. So hearing him say that makes me hammers home the point that this is a guy that is going to translate really well to the modern day in the NFL, and he's going to have a very successful career.
Moving on to our next pick. For the 19th overall pick in the 2020-25 NFL Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Malachi Starks. That's right, Falcons fans, you heard it correctly. You are once again projected to skip over not one but two first-round potential picks. Malachi Starks will be a Buccaneer playing alongside Tyke Smith. As the resident Atlanta Falcons fan, how do you feel about that?
If you pass up on Malachi Starks, don't know what we're doing, to be honest. But if you get an edge rusher, not going to be complaining too much. I will say that. Depends on who they pick. Like, I would have to know, like, what pick did we use at 15 to allow Malachi Starks to fall to 19th.
What surprised me about this pick alone is that Malachi Starks in this draft projection is taken above Mykel Williams. Now, I know that there were times where Mykel Williams was a top 10 lock. Some people were saying he might be the number one overall pick. Malachi Starks was kind of hovering in that, hey, 15 to 25 might fall the first round in some. So it's very interesting to see him here. Obviously, I think he's a great fit for the secondary there. Tampa Bay's gotten really, really good in the secondary the last few years. Tyke Smith made a lot of good plays. I got Antoine Winfield back there as well, which makes it somewhat interesting because you'll have an Antoine Winfield, Malachi Starks, Tyke Smith trio. I don't know if they're anticipating the end of rookie deal for Antoine Winfield to be so high that they're not going to pay it, but it's an interesting pick nonetheless. Yeah, I think it strikes me as hey, we've got this guy available to us. We've got the 19 pick. Yeah, let's just go out and get the most talented one available.
Yeah, and especially being able to get a secondary player like Malachi who makes plays on the football, is intellectual of the game of football, and has started 3 years at the University of Georgia. Even if your highest need isn't at safety in this draft class, if he's there for you to take at 19, 20, or 21, it might be really, really hard to pass up on Malachi because some people are saying that he is the safest pick in this draft class.
Which makes this next one very interesting. With the 31st pick of the 2025 NFL Draft, the bitch-ass Kansas City Chiefs select Mykel Williams. Falls all the way down to 31 in this one. That's interesting to me. Is it the 40 time?
Maybe.
I didn't think the 40 time was that bad.
Dude, for him at that size to run that 40 time, who cares?
I saw all the Twitter reactions were because, you see the Nolan Smiths and the Jalen Walkers and all these guys that are running 4.5s. Ooh, that's a bad time for Mykel Williams. He's going to slip because of that. That's not the type of player he is, but nevertheless, I think it's very interesting that he falls that far.
Yeah, going to a team like that too. Good situation for him for sure, but I don't think Mykel's going to fall that far.
He better not.
Just because as much as traits are hammered home to us when we watch the NFL draft, this is a traits guy. I mean, and it could be the lack of production or it could be the injuries that maybe make him fall that far, but I don't think Mykel Williams is going to fall to the 31st overall pick.
Yeah, I would be very surprised, but nevertheless, that's a very, very good fit for him. That concludes the first round. So 3 Georgia Bulldogs projected to go in the first round. Kind of what we anticipated. 3 guys hovering around that, 10, 15 to 25 range. Kind of a flip-flop between Mykel and Malachi. Next up, for the 50th overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Tate Ratledge. So according to this, going along the lines of Tate Ratledge's 4th most talented prospect in that. I think it's an interesting fit for him.
Yeah. I think that Tate is certainly a safe pick at offensive line and at a guard spot because he has played for so long in the SEC. The only real thing about Tate is I guess the injury history with him. That would be the one knock against him. You would have said the athleticism, maybe if you just looked at the profile, but then you go and watch what he did at the NFL Combine. It's like, well, that's not the case anymore. This is one of the more athletic players in this as an offensive lineman. So I think that the best thing for Tate, and one of the reasons why he could definitely be a top 50 player in this draft class, is he is kind of one of these safer picks. You know exactly what you're getting in Tate, and he would be an immediate play.
I like that one a lot. The interesting part about this draft, the 52nd overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks have another selection. They take Jared Wilson.
So they're just locking down the interior with the dogs.
So it seems like they're just locking down the interior line with really reliable, solid picks. I do think it's kind of interesting that you go from 51, 52, within 3 picks, you take 2 Georgia Bulldogs in the interior offensive line. That says a lot about how, A, NFL teams view what the Georgia does on the interior, and B, how Seattle views their team and how they think that they need a lot of guys here.
I am glad that, at least based on how mock drafts are going and what people are saying about Jared Wilson, that his decision to declare this year was indeed the right decision for him, because he's the number 1 center in the class. He's going to be the first center taken off the board, whenever that is. He is probably going to be a 2nd to 3rd round draft pick. And I know that there were some questions and maybe some confusion of why he decided to declare for the draft after this year. Didn't even start a full season. He started 1 season and he got banged up at some point in the season, so he missed a couple of games. So I'm glad that it is going to work out for him. He is going to be the number 1 center in this class, and he made the right decision.
52 is a really, really cushy spot for a center, I believe. Where was Cedric last year, in the 60s?
Yeah, he might have been 5th round.
Yeah, late 5th round. And he was, I believe, the 1st or 2nd center taken in that class as well. So a major step up for Jared Wilson. And if it holds true, obviously this is a projection. We have no idea, but it's a very, very cushy spot for him. Next up is the 102nd pick. The Detroit Lions select Dylan Fairchild, and I think this is a perfect pick. I think Dylan Fairchild embodies the kind of, we value athleticism, but we also value toughness and just the grittiness and the willingness to play whistle to whistle. It is the Detroit Lion culture, and I think that Dylan Fairchild will fit very well into that.
Yeah, him and Dan Campbell can just mainline pre-workout all the time together.
Yeah,
that sounds like a perfect fit for where Dylan Fairchild needs to go. People always said he was one of the strongest people on Georgia's football team, state champion wrestler. Sounds like a really good fit for him.
I do find it interesting that there is a 50-point or 50-spot gap of, hey, here's all the Georgia Bulldogs that we really value really, really high. And then after that, it's kind of, okay, here's the guys that Georgia prospects, super talented, you're going to take them, but there's a gap in between there, kind of a 1-round gap. Very interesting, in my opinion. Moving on, though, with the 117th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select linebacker Smile Munden.
What do you think it is about Smile that makes him not a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick?
Apart from the injury history, I think it's that he never really flashed from a oh my God standpoint at Georgia. Nakobe Dean had this. CJ Allen's done this. Obviously, guys like Roquan Smith and Quay Walker and the first rounders of that did this. Even Nolan Smith to an aspect. Smile Munden, as consistent as he was throughout 2022 to 2024 when he was on the field, I never really felt like it was like, my God, Smile Munden looked like an animal in that play. I could be wrong. That's just the way I felt about it.
I just stumbled into this take. Smile Munden is a traits-year Monty Rice.
Yeah,
I think that's exactly what he is.
Love that.
He's a very consistent football player. He's always going to be in the right spot, and he could do more things than what Monty Rice was able to do. But he also played banged up. He was very tough during his time at Georgia. Played through multiple injuries. Monty Rice, as we found out after his career at Georgia, played through multiple injuries that most guys probably aren't playing through. I'm sure Smile had moments like that during his Georgia career. I would say he is a traits-year Monty Rice. Now, I believe Monty Rice was a 3rd-round draft pick
about that, yeah.
To the Tennessee Titans, but it's just weird to me because, when I think about Smile Munden and what he is at the linebacker position and what people are and what teams are often wanting at linebacker, he kind of fits that mold. I mean, I think he can do just about anything and everything. He can cover. He can support you in the run, and he's always going to be in the right spots. And he was coached under Glenn Schumann.
Yeah.
So I would think that those things would make him a higher draft pick. But
now let's play a hypothetical game here. He never has a foot issue. He never gets injured. He misses, let's be fair, 5 games throughout his career. From 2022 to when he first started to this season, he misses 5 games. I think he's a day 2 guy.
Yeah, I think
that's probably going to be what a lot of teams get hung up on him with is like, hey, you missed the majority of the 2023 season. You missed a large part of the 2024 season. You had lingering issues in 2022. Like, that scares us as an NFL organization that plays 5 more games a season naturally and all of this other stuff. So it makes sense. I think it's unfortunate because he is a really, really good player, and he's never going to be wrong, like you said.
You want to spin the wheel again?
Yeah, let's spin the wheel again.
Ooh, we're spinning the wheel again. I'm not going to do the noise making this
Paul,
time.
it's fails. You get a job on The Price is Right.
Oh, thank you.
Ooh, I like this one.
Classic.
One of the more forgotten games of the Kirby Smart era, I feel like.
You think? That was like the igniter of it all.
It was, but I think when you have the 2017 Rose Bowl and then your saga with Alabama in between that and everything that went on in, the last 3 or 4 years, like the 2017 SEC Championship, which, like you said, really did kick off this, things are going to be different under Kirby Smart. It kind of gets forgotten about. And it wasn't a great game. It was a very slow burn. Georgia got out and kind of just slowly suffocated them. Obviously, the knockout punch with DeAndre Swift at the end, but I think people forget how that game is a Davin Bellamy turnover away from maybe going differently. Auburn drove down the field and scored on one of their first drives and was driving again.
Tight end was wide open.
Yeah, was in the red zone, and Davin Bellamy causes a fumble. Georgia gets the ball back. Things go from there. I don't remember if it was 7-7, if they were down 7-0, but obviously after that play, never looked back. Kerryon Johnson, the kryptonite against Georgia in the first meeting where they beat him number 1 in Auburn, was not available for that game, one of the bigger what-ifs. But the thing I remember most about this game, obviously, the DeAndre Swift run. We can assume that one's already there. I remember the Isaac Nana touchdown. I remember Roquan Smith absolutely baptizing someone on the sideline. I don't remember. It was a wide receiver. I can't remember his name. And then the Davin Bellamy strip sack.
I think what I learned, and I think what most fans maybe would have learned in this football game, is just exactly what a standard at Georgia was going to be under Kirby Smart, where we have Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb. Here's this true freshman, DeAndre Swift, who's going to put the final nail in the coffin. We have to go to our true freshman quarterback, Jake Fromm. Don't worry. He's going to be ready for this moment. He's going to win a conference title for us. You have all of these guys on the top of the depth chart that are very talented football players, but even if you get past them, there's just another one waiting for you.
I also remember, do you remember Terry Godwin just absolutely dunking on a corner for like 2 plays in a row, got the touchdown, the 50-50 ball, then did it for the 2-point conversion.
That. Yeah.
So that's another one. And I think you're right. This was the first game, in my opinion, that I very vividly remember watching and thinking, this is a really big game, and Georgia's just out physicaling their opponent.
Yeah.
Back in like the 2012s and the prime years of Mark Richt, it was kind of like they had to finesse their way to a title victory, or finesse their way to a big game win. It happened in 2013 against LSU. You had to have a couple of really big touchdowns. 2012 SEC Championship, where you almost beat Alabama, you had to have a blocked field goal that turned for a touchdown. Like finicky ways that were kind of like, things are going really well for us. How can we continue to build on that? This was just a beatdown. From the second or third offensive drive, it was Georgia's game to lose, and they handled it perfectly.
I had to rewatch this game because I had a high school basketball game the day of this, so I can remember. I get taken out of the game. My coach would be like, "They're up 14-7, Jay Will. Don't worry about it. They're doing good." And I get score updates every time I check out of the game. But hated to miss that one. But Commerce had to catch these hands, man. So.
Did you win that game at least?
Oh yeah, we won.
All right, good. I remember I watched that game in my friend's basement with like a bunch of like their family friends and stuff, and I felt weird like getting up and cheering because it was like they were Georgia fans, but they were obviously very like
a docile college football fan.
They were like very like, oh yay, hooray, and I was just like,
I don't associate with those people.
Yeah, I have not gone back over there since. But anyway, all right, where were we? We were all right with the 127th pick of the 2025 NFL Draft. The Los Angeles Rams select Dominic Lovett.
This is very interesting.
This one is very interesting to me. I thought, you and I both thought, if there was going to be a receiver taken early, the first receiver taken for Georgia would be Arian Smith.
Just because if you look if you're doing a comparison between Arian Smith and Dominic Lovett, Arian at least has traits that NFL teams have eye candy for. Like, he runs a really fast 40 time. He was a deep threat at Georgia. He made some explosive plays. I like that guy in our offense, where Dom Lovett he never really flashed enough during his time at Georgia like people had hoped he would. He was just kind of steady during his whole time. Like every single Dominic Lovett stat line to me was always like 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown, or touchdown every other game, something like that. Like that felt like the typical Dominic Lovett stat line. And then you have Arian Smith. It was 4 receptions for 127 yards and a touchdown. So I just felt like not a knock to Dominic Lovett, but more so Arian just seems like a more desirable prospect in the viewpoint of an NFL GM.
And we can go ahead and spoil this on the list. Arian Smith is undrafted in this mock draft.
Yeah, did not get picked.
So does not get picked. Very interesting. Obviously has had injury issues and drop issues throughout his extensive career at the University of Georgia. I would assume that is playing a factor into him not being ranked this high. I also don't think he ran as well as people were hoping he would. I mean, Matthew Golden ran faster than him.
Yeah, he did.
So he was kind of expecting, like, hey, this is a blazer. Watch this. And again, 4.38 it was, or 4.36. Nothing to balk at, but it wasn't like this, dear God, this guy's going to run past everyone we put him in. So I get why Arian Smith would be undrafted. I am kind of surprised by Dominic Lovett going this high.
I am too.
But the very next pick, the Washington Commanders, for the 128th pick, select running back Trevor Etienne.
What round is this? My math ain't mathing right now.
So this is like round 5 or 6.
Okay, so that sounds about right for Etienne.
4 or 5.
Really kind of unfortunate that he is in such a loaded running back class, and I think it's one of the reasons why so many people questioned why he did go to the draft. I think it ultimately was there's really nothing left for Etienne to prove. Like I don't think another season would have just lofted him up draft boards because of what he did next season. If anything, it would have been, he's going to be a higher draft pick because the class isn't as loaded as it is this year. So to no fault of his own, I think the 5th round is probably respectable for him. And some teams are going to get a really solid running back in the 5th round, and they're going to get a number 2 running back that can take carries and alleviate their starter, and he's going to pick up positive yards consistently for you.
Yeah, it's one of these things with the running backs. It's either you are a day 1 must-have Ashton Genty, Marion Hampton, where it's like this guy could change our franchise, or it's day 3, day 4 type guys. And I think Trevor Etienne falls into this category. He's a very solid running back. Never really battled too many injury issues. I don't think he had extensive injuries at Florida. Had a nagging rib injury at Georgia, but that's not something that really concerned teams or raises red flag. It's not soft tissue. It's not ligament damage. It's just, hey, football is a brutal sport and you get bruised up a couple of times. I like this pick for Etienne, and I think it kind of could fit into what they have for him as the Austin Eckler role. Of, he's out of the backfield, might not be the fastest guy on the field, but really finds the right lanes.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of what the draft process has in mind for him. All right, moving on to the next one. With the 174th pick, the Dallas Cowboys are selecting Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. Now, this one kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
He had such a good pro day, such a good combine workout that we thought, this is a day 2 or 3 guy.
Oh, I thought that he'd be a 3rd round potential draft pick after the day he had at the NFL Combine. So I'll put it this way. If TID falls to 174th overall pick, a lot of you NFL teams didn't do your homework and made a big mistake, in my opinion.
And I think, again, and that's what I'm noticing the trend of most of these guys on this list is there are major red flags for injuries. I mean, TID sat out the entire, basically the majority of 2023, missed a good chunk of 2024, played all 2025 and was really effective. I mean, there was a Kentucky coach that said, Michael Williams, that guy's playing just as good as him. So I get why people are saying this guy should be a 3rd rounder. I think leagues get scared shitless when you have a lot of injury history. That said, the Dallas Cowboys are going to get a really, really good player if they get him in the 174th
100%.
pick.
You should be really pleased with that pick.
All right, moving on to the next one. The Los Angeles Rams select Warren Brinson with the 202nd pick. And this feels like the quintessential, Sean McVay, let's take a Bulldog here. They've done this before. They did this with, who's the last offensive lineman they took?
Warren McClendon.
Warren McClendon. Yeah, it's like that back half, 5th or 6th round. You know what? Let's get some good culture guys in here. Let's get some good players.
Kirby Smart got for us.
Warren McClendon had, from what I can tell,
he's starting for him.
Yeah,
he's playing for him.
Has been a knockout home run for them. So taking a shot on a guy like Warren Brinson, who I think could be a very solid interior defensive line player for the Rams. I think that he's not necessarily going to be the flash. Oh my God, did you see that? Could totally see him being in the league for 8 or 9 years.
If Warren Brinson, and if he made even just 40% more of those tackles that he had the opportunity to make, Warren Brinson might be a second-round draft pick because that's how many flash plays he could have had and how many disruptive plays he could have had. And again, he constantly gets in the backfield, and that's what I think makes him such an enticing draft prospect is obviously he has the tools to have success on the line of scrimmage, and he has no problem holding his own there. It's just about finding some consistency. So taking a stab on a player like Warren Brinson at this point in the draft, I would be all here for it, and I think the Rams would be a great location for him.
I love that. All right. We are now on to my favorite pick of this entire mock draft. For the 228th pick, the Detroit Lions select safety Dan Jackson. Dirty Dan is getting drafted despite not getting an invite to the combine, despite being overlooked his entire career at UGA, slept on throughout. We know here in this network, we are major Dan Jackson fans. So, and I think this is a perfect fit for him. You get to go and you get to learn under some really, really good safeties. I'm forgetting the guy that just drafted at Bama 2 years ago.
Brian Branch, is that his name?
Yeah, Brian Branch. Guys like that you get to play under. He's going to be a day one impact guy. Even if he doesn't start, he's a gunner. He's gritty. He's everything that Dan Campbell is looking for. I think Dan Jackson is a great fit on the Detroit Lions should he go there.
He's a great fit for anybody. He definitely needs to be drafted. One of these 32 teams better draft him.
All right. We've got 2 more picks left. We'll do one more and then another spin, and then we'll get to the last pick of our. All right. With the 246th pick, the New York Giants select Xavier Truss, and totally get this. It's
swing offensive lineman player in the 7th round.
You're in the waning picks. You know what? Hey, let's take a risk on a guy that can play literally every position on the field, even if he never starts day one, we're never too deep in shit because we have one guy that, hey, our guard's down. All right, you can play left guard.
Yeah.
Oh, our right tackle's hurt. You got to play right tackle today. I don't think anyone's expecting Xavier Truss to go into the league and be a day one starter, but he is one of these guys to where we've got a really wide safety net right now in one player. So it makes total sense.
And it's why he's going to continue to be in the NFL once he gets to this point, because if he does become available, it's going to be, well, I can play all 5 positions. Oh, that's an extra depth piece everywhere. We'll certainly take Xavier Truss.
I like it. All right, Jay, well, let's spin the wheel one more time.
Spinning the wheel again for a third time. Big money, big money, big money.
Oh, shit.
Was not big money?
We're going to have to talk about this one, aren't we?
The one you didn't want to see.
The 2019 SEC Championship. The one game on this list that Georgia loses because I felt like it was worth talking about. I was at this game, actually.
Yeah, I'm so sorry you spent money on that football game.
I didn't. It was a friend. It was actually the same friend that I watched the game.
I'm sorry your friend spent money for you to go to that game.
It was his birthday present.
This is just getting worse.
Tough birthday present. And I'll never forget walking into that stadium. And I was a senior in high school at this time. And I'm kind of, not in the college realm yet, but I'm getting to that area. And I see a bunch of college-age LSU fans and I'll never forget it. He's got a purple sweatshirt on. It's Joe Burrow, and it says Big Dick Burrow. And he is downing Fireball, not shooters, the plastic 50 bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Downing that.
In the stadium?
As we're walking to the gates.
Oh, okay. I was like, how do you get that thing in there?
Throws that into the trash and starts mimicking barking at some 5 or 6 year old UGA kids. And it was at that moment where I was like, oh, college is different. Walk into the game. Obviously, Georgia gets first possession. LSU gets first possession. Georgia gets the ball back. Either way, first offensive possession. Jake Fromm has a beautiful throw down the middle of the field to Tyler Simmons, and it's dropped. Mm-hmm. And I immediately sat down in my seat and said, we're going to lose this game.
And boy, did they lose that game. I think the biggest takeaway for me from this game is if you're ever going up against an offense where Kirby Smart feels like he has to completely change what his defense does, probably not going to go good. They were throwing so much stuff at Joe Burrow. I mean, Lewis Seen was playing linebacker in this football game. I don't know if people remember that.
Foreshadowing.
I mean, my gosh, the amount of stuff that Georgia changed going into this game to try and stop, that to me is now an indicator. If you start hearing Georgia's completely kind of changing what they do on defense for this game, probably not going to go too well.
Obviously, you remember the Joe Burrow spin out and throw down the field.
You couldn't get him on the ground.
I remember the Jake Fromm getting hurt play. I think people forget Stetson Bennett took snaps in this game.
The mailman himself.
The mailman took snaps.
More foreshadowing.
In all 3 of the SEC championships he was at. Or not 3. Technically, he was in 4 of 2017.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless, the mailman took snaps in 3 SEC championship games. I think people forget that. Obviously, the George Pickens touchdown late was kind of like, too little, too late. I remember Dominic Blaylock tearing his ACL in this game, and that was kind of the downturn of his career, obviously. He was a very promising freshman receiver. A lot happened in this game that was extremely negative and was extremely like, man, we are still not where we want to be as a program. And I think Kirby Smart realized that too, because they went out and changed things. You went out that season. You got Todd Monken. Say what you want about the career he had at Georgia. You made moves in the transfer portal to go get Jamie Newman, to go get JT Daniels, 2 quarterbacks that you thought were going to elevate the offense around them. There were a lot of moves that came out of this game. Even Kirby Smart said in the post-game presser or after the fact, he was like, they had better players than us. We need to go get more talent.
The wide receiver room specifically is what he mentioned.
Yes,
we do not have SEC wide receivers.
And since then, I feel like they have not thrown the bag back the Brinks truck for it, but they have placed an emphasis on the quarterback position. Look at what they're doing this year. They've placed an emphasis on the wide receiver position. They have consistently nabbed top guys out of the transfer portal. It might not have turned out how they wanted it to, but there was a time where Dominic Lovett was the hottest name in the SEC. So they have made moves that they can't. So I totally think that this was kind of the turning point of the Kirby Smart administration. Obviously, the 2020 year is what it is. A lot of things happened that year that were out of Kirby Smart's control, out of anyone's control. But I look at this game for as much of a beatdown as it was, for as much as a crucifixion as it was for Georgia football, and as much as it was a testament to the greatness of that 2019 LSU team. I think it also was really the turning point in what got this Georgia dynasty going.
100%. It was a big learning moment for both the fans and Kirby, I believe.
Now, we talked about a little bit how they went and tried to morph offenses in this. You have an interesting thing about how...
No. We got one more pick in the draft, and we have an even better segment to get to after this.
I completely forgot about this. All right, we have reached the final Georgia Bulldog projected to be selected in the 2025 NFL Draft, and it just so happens that they are Mr. Irrelevant. For you, those of you who don't know, Mr. Irrelevant is a title that is given to the last player selected in the NFL Draft. It's kind of a badge of honor that people wear to say, like, hey, you're the underdog in this draft class. People don't really believe you. Georgia had one of these. Tay Crowder had a couple of really good seasons with the Giants. Obviously, the most famous is Brock Purdy, who's taken the San Francisco 49ers to a Super Bowl. This year, the Georgia Bulldogs have Mr. Irrelevant. For the 257th pick, the bitch-ass Kansas City Chiefs are selecting defensive tackle Nazir Stackhouse. Now, Nazir Stackhouse has a much more interesting story we found this week in producing show notes than just being Mr. Irrelevant.
All right. The Athletic wrote an article on Nazir Stackhouse and his long struggle with narcolepsy. If you don't know what narcolepsy is, it's a condition where your body will just get tired randomly and you'll fall asleep, and you really have no control over it. And so Nazir talks about how he struggled, how he overcame this throughout his college football career, and why, obviously NFL teams don't need to worry about this happening. But there are just some great quotes in this. I've always been a big Nas Stackhouse fan, and these things certainly made me an even bigger fan of his. He talked about the Georgia Tech game, the game that went into 8 overtimes, and he was saying in his head, like, please just score, please just score, please just score, because he was getting so tired and he wanted to go home and sleep. So he talks about how I'm on the bench fighting sleep, just fighting it the entire time.
That's crazy. To imagine being in what is arguably one of the most classic Georgia games of all time and being a player in that game in the stands or on the field and thinking, God, I can't fall asleep right now. I got to stay awake. Crazy to think about.
This is one of my favorite paragraphs of this entire story. For one thing, Stackhouse rarely drives. He has a license, but always has someone in the car with him and keeps the drive short.
Good. One of them does it, at least.
He never falls asleep when he's on the field during game action, whether it be a game or practice. He did fall asleep during meetings, but coaches would work with him. Kirby Smart was known to lean over to tap Stackhouse. Right, Nazir? Right? Yeah. Coach Stackhouse would reply, jolted back awake. More than once, Smart said with a chuckle, it was real. I've never seen a guy on the sideline in a game go out. Smart mimicked going to sleep, but he's a great kid, Smart said. Once they get it under control, it was not a big deal and never affected his performance.
Can you imagine being in that meeting room? And obviously, we've heard heard some stories just of this spring practice alone of Kirby Smart kind of chewing out guys and putting them on blast for falling asleep during meetings. And then it's over here. It's like, bro, Nas is falling asleep every damn day. He's falling asleep at practice. The man fell asleep on the bench mid-game last week, coach. Why are you not yelling at him? It's like, bro, you don't know how narcolepsy works.
And this story right here gives a better perspective of how unaware you are of it when it happens. It says Stackhouse talks about the condition freely, how suddenly it hits, and can't help but laugh at some of those times. He once slept while on a treadmill. He felt it coming, so he grabbed the handrails, and then the next thing he knew, he woke back up. And I'm like, damn, how long was I out?
All right, anyway.
And I'm like, damn, how long was I out? I looked down. I was down there for like 12 minutes, Stackhouse said.
What are you doing if you walk into a gym and you see Nazir Stackhouse, one of the larger human beings you're going to encounter in your daily life, just snoozing at the bottom of a treadmill that's constantly running? What are you doing in that situation? You trying to wake him up? You should be like,
I'd be concerned like, oh, dude, like he just fainted. Like we need to get him to a hospital or something like that. Like to see someone just completely collapse like that.
A human as large as that, just like snoozing at the bottom of a treadmill would make me very concerned.
All right. This one I think might make some other players jealous. Stackhouse said, it definitely didn't affect my playing, but say we were playing one of those, I don't know, I would say under-talented teams. He's talking about teams like Tennessee State or Tennessee Tech. I mean, I play 1 or 2 quarters. After that, I'm on the sideline. We had a tent, and I would literally sit down and watch the guys play, and I'd fall asleep.
Damn,
he got to sleep during games. He had a whole tent for himself.
That sucks, bro. Imagine you're a walk-on. And you know it's Tennessee Tech. You've been getting your ass kicked on scout team your entire life. You're a senior. You've climbed your way up to the depth chart to the 5th tight end in the room. And the 4th quarter comes of Tennessee Tech, and Coach Hartley calls your name and goes, "Hey, you're in." You go in. You play 2 or 3 plays. You block. You don't do shit. You come out like, "That's the greatest moment of my life, Coach. Thank you. I got on the field as a Georgia Bulldog, and here's Nas."
Just in the tents sleeping.
I would be livid, dude.
Oh my god.
And honestly, I knew about narcolepsy, and I thought it was just like, oh, they get tired a lot. I didn't know it was like he just
I didn't know it was sudden. I didn't know it was one of those things. And I'm just thinking about like, and I'm shocked that this really never happened because I can't recall a moment where this happened in the middle of a game. But you know, if you're ever watching a game and you see a player go in the tent, like everybody starts writing articles or firing off tweets like, "Hey, Nazir Stackhouse just went into the tent trying to figure out what it is." And it's like
snap time,
dude. He's been in there for like 15 minutes. Like I don't know what's going on with Nas. And then like he comes out of the tent with a pillow or something like that. And it's like, he's just sleeping.
He's got the sleeping cap on.
He's got white noise going on in the tent. Like brother's just knocked out. He's not actually hurt.
That is one of the most fascinating things about a Georgia player that I didn't realize how effective narcolepsy could be. So shout out to Nas for battling that. Shout out to Nas for getting drafted in this mock draft. I hope he has... Actually, I don't want to say anything hopeful about his career with the Chiefs. I hope he gets traded immediately and then has a great career.
Man, you really hate the Chiefs, huh?
Bro, I hate the Chiefs.
All right.
Imagine the Saints being in the position that the Chiefs are in right now. Patrick Mahomes is the Saints quarterback. They've appeared in 3 straight Super Bowls. How do you feel about the Saints, Jay Will?
Not too good.
Exactly.
Not too good.
Anywho, so we talked about earlier about how that 2019 LSU game really caused a lot of changes for the Georgia offense, particularly in the way they were called, the way they were recruited. Jay, well, you kind of mentioned in the notes here, Georgia could be morphing into a more Bobo personalized offense. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, this take kind of just stumbled into my brain today, and I wanted to bring it to the show because I want to see if you kind of agree with this, because I truly don't know if I'm just making this up in my head, if I'm seeing things, hallucinating, whatever, or just making something fit that shouldn't. But I just kind of think like the personnel that Georgia has on offense this year is very akin to some of the offenses that he had previously at Georgia. Like when I think of what Gunnar Stockton is at quarterback, I think it kind of fits into what Aaron Murray was during his time at Georgia.
Mobile enough.
Yeah, athletic and mobile enough to escape you out of some situations. Can really, like, just kind of their play style. Like, obviously, I think Murray is a little bit more talented with his arm, and I think he's cleaner from a fundamental standpoint, but just kind of like a Georgia quarterback. I think they have some similarities there a little bit.
So when I read this in the show notes, I initially thought this was going to be, Mike Bobo is taking more of a spin onto the way he play calls and the way he schemes things. Because let's face it, we're heading into 3 years ago from Todd Monken leaving. Like, Todd Monken's been gone for 3 years at this point. We're heading into 6 years of when the Todd Monken University of Georgia offensive system was first implemented. I think it's irresponsible if you don't morph that system somewhat over half a decade of college football. We've seen how much things have changed just on the field alone in the sport the last 5 years of the game. So I do think that having Bobo be able to kind of mesh and form his idea and have some new inklings of what a Bobo personalized offense is, I thought that's kind of where you were going with this. And obviously you do see that in the personnel. There's a lot of personnel that resembles what it looked like when those Georgia offenses were at their peak under him.
Yeah, like even this, like big-bodied wide receivers. You had A.J. Green and Massaquoi, and then you also had Malcolm Mitchell and Chris Conley. Mm-hmm. Now you're kind of getting this with Noah Thomas and Colby Young. You got these two big, like you could put them on both sides of the field. Like they just kind of resemble what Georgia looked like in a receiver standpoint.
I also think this is going to help Bobo in regards of you can be yourself. And I worried about this when they first hired him, and it was, hey, he's going to run what Todd Monken does. He's going to do the plays Todd Monken does. Todd Monken's obviously a great offensive coordinator, but his mind does not work the same as Mike Bobo's. Mike Bobo's does not work the same as Todd Monken's. I think that for the first year or so, and kind of maybe sort of this year, Bobo was really, really trying to stay true to the quote-unquote Georgia system that I think hindered his creativity on offense. Not to say that he's a bad coordinator, but I do think that when you get told, hey, here's the system we're running, here's the blueprint for it all, this is what Georgia runs, it limits what you can do as a coordinator. I think the further we get from that, you can still have the foundation of what Mike or Todd Monken had. Obviously, we still saw they ran a lot of the same plays they were running in 2021. But I do think you're going to allow Bobo to be more creative as an offensive coordinator here, which is a good thing.
And even like offensive line, like Drew Bobo might be a little David Andrews-esque. I could see some similarities there where maybe not the most gifted human, but that Joker is going to be 40 yards down the field every single time to help Georgia make a big play. And he's going to do all the right things. And then even like you have a headliner at running back like you always did when Mike Bobo was here previously. So I just kind of felt like, some of the offensive personnel that Georgia has this year kind of matches what Mike Bobo has had to work with beforehand, and now you're sticking that into a modern play calling sheet and a more so Todd Monken type offense that Mike Bobo is utilizing with guys that maybe Bobo is more akin to.
We've got 3 more games left. You want a double spin real quick?
A double spin? We'll do one more spin at least.
We'll do one more at least.
Give us a good one. I guess it's all good ones now.
Yeah,
we don't have to worry about any of that.
Out of the way. Ooh. I know this one.
The sacredness.
This is like one of the first games I ever remembered, like sitting down, watching it, and then being able to recount plays that happened.
I really just remember the one play. That's kind of like all I remember because I believe I would have been 6 at this time.
Yeah, I was 5 at this time.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in my living room and watching that and being like, I just everybody on the field. And my dad's going crazy. But I was like, oh my God. My dad grew up throughout the 90s, so this was a big deal to him. I was just like, why is everyone dancing right now? I don't get it. That's obviously the player I remember. I think that one thing that is forgotten about this game, and I don't want to take away from the win at all, Tim Tebow played it like 60%.
Yeah, for sure.
He was hurt this game, and it was very evident in the way they called that game. It was very evident in the way that he played. Not taking anything away from that win, but you did not get a fully healthy Tim Tebow. I believe it was a shoulder injury. But nonetheless, one of the original games, and I think it's kind of that iconic Mark Richt win of, you know what, we're tired of getting pushed around. We're going to let loose. We're going to have fun with it.
Yeah, I think this game was more so just about the context of it, of things that had happened previously and kind of like where Florida was at during that time and where Florida was tracking towards compared to what Georgia was kind of doing of like, man, a few years ago we were in the SEC championship game and we had DJ Shockley, and now we're still trying to find ourselves again, it feels like, under Mark Richt, and it's sending a message to Urban Meyer, of all people, and kind of taking that back in this rivalry. I think it's because, like, I remember watching the Swamp documentary with Tim Tebow and about those teams during that time period, and when this game popped up and like getting refreshed on everything that had happened up until that game. It's kind of unfortunate what happened the next year because Florida had a similar message for the Dogs, but definitely a game.
Calling timeouts in the fourth quarter is not as similar.
That's Bush League.
That's Bush League. Sending the entire team out. First quarter celebration when you might lose that game.
It might bite you in the butt.
I also don't think we acknowledge how big of a risk that could have been for Mark Richt. You lose that game. You lose that game. I mean, Mark Richt might not make it to 2010.
They're like, this clown, the nerve on this guy.
Yeah. So one of probably the most iconic moment in the Georgia-Florida rivalry. You can say run, Lindsey, run, but I think the play on the field itself is much better than the Larry Munson call as far as the history of that rivalry goes. So very, very fun game I remember watching. Mm-hmm. One more spin, or are we going to next
Let's get into another one of these topics.
All right, Georgia's biggest strength and weakness. This has been on the show sheet for a while, and I think it's just a quick way of us listing out, coming into the season, what are some of the strengths that Georgia has to offer, and what are some of the weaknesses that we already know of. For strength, I kind of did a cop-out and did a lot of things that Georgia's already known for. The physicality, the discipline, the talent that they have. Those are kind of three things that you are expected to have for Georgia. That's what you get in the quintessential Kirby Smart offense, as well as scheme. They have a lot of the defensive scheme they have is pretty much bulletproof, and when it's not, they adjust accordingly. I think the biggest example of this is last year against Alabama. You were getting cooked in your 4-2-5 mint front. They transitioned to a 3-3, and all of a sudden things really, really slowed down for the Alabama offense. It basically took two incredible plays by Ryan Williams for them to make any points in that entire second half. So really showcased how much of a scheme advantage they have. The last strength that I have for this Georgia team, I think it's kind of different from the ones that they've had before, and it's kind of unique to this year's team. They have something to prove, and they have a chip on their shoulder.
Good old chip on the shoulder.
The last 3 years, it's been national champions. Can you win another national title? Can you return to the national title? You're now 2 seasons removed from your last national title. Most of your roster that was playing for those 2021 and 22 national titles are gone or didn't even play in the games. So you've got this entire roster that's full of guys that have something to prove now. Don't really have the, hey, you know what? If all else fails, I got a ring. Now you have an SEC championship ring, but we all know that's not the end goal.
My biggest strength actually kind of plays into what I would say a lot of people would say a weakness is for Georgia. And I would say that despite the departures, I think they have enough returning key pieces to still keep confidence. I'll just rattle off some names that I had on my list of C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, Kristen Miller, Dalen Everett, Nate Frazier, Cash Jones, Dylan Bell, Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, London Humphreys. I'm sure I'm missing some. I didn't even mention Ernest Green or Monroe Freeling or any of those guys, or even a Xavier McLeod who got playing time last year. I didn't even mention KJ Bolden. There's returning pieces at a lot of key spots, and those are all key players from last season to where, you lost some really talented players. There's no denying that. You lost one of your best safeties in program history. You lost one of your best defensive linemen, and you lost a lot of offensive linemen as well. But I think that there's enough returning players at key positions to where it still is we lost some players like C.J. Allen returning as your starting linebacker is a major plus. Getting Kristen Miller back after the season he had last year, having Nate Frazier for at least 2 more years, that's a huge plus. Even having a guy like Dylan Bell come back for another year, and you're hearing the Kirby Smart talking about how he wants to be a Swiss Army knife in this offense, and he'll do whatever it takes, and he'll help the team in whatever way it needs. They need him, whether it's 15 reps at running back or it's playing in the slot or doing whatever it is, and getting both of your starting tight ends from last year and Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp back. There's enough returning pieces on both sides of the football to where you should still be confident going into this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be confident. What do you think some of the weaknesses are going to be heading into this?
I mean, I think it is and this. I just put the amount of unknowns.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes into all the weaknesses. Especially, we talk about it ad nauseum, but safety, who's playing beside KJ Bolden, even Kirby saying they truly don't know. Nobody's really stepped up yet. You still got a few more weeks of spring to figure it out. But, I mean,
I think another aspect is your injury is going to be more catastrophic this year.
Yeah.
Or your, God forbid, suspensions. If, going into the 2024 season, losing Robert Thomas hurt, losing Colby Young really, really hurt the end.
Yeah, you had no.
You lose guys like that this year on your roster where, hey, Nate Frazier goes down, or someone like Drew Bobo, guys like that are just stars. Don't even have to be full-fledged stars. That hurts. That's a big deal. Whereas last year was, Yeah, Jared Wilson going down really, really sucks. But we have Drew Bobo we can plug in. We're really confident can be an SEC guy.
I mean, even like at a spot like tackle for the last few years, it's like, oh, don't worry, we got Broderick Jones. Oh, plug him in against Ohio State. We're going to be fine there.
Exactly.
We have Amarius Mims waiting behind as well. We can play him if one of our tackles go down. Oh, we have this guy named Monroe Freeling. He was really talented coming out of high school. We can play him. This year, it's Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green, and then it's like, are we going to play true freshman Juan Gaston? And now he might be of the caliber of which I was just mentioning of, oh, don't worry, we have Juan Gaston still sitting on it. But again, that's like a true freshman that you could potentially be playing in one of those spots.
Yeah. And then the last weakness I have, and this is I feel like it's everyone's beating a dead horse, but the schedule is brutal.
At least you get him at home, man.
You get him at home, and that's the one aspect. But then there's that much more pressure to win because you haven't lost 30 games there.
It's got to end at some point, right?
It's got to end at some point, and
just like losing an SEC game, it's got to happen at some point. The streak. So yeah, I mean, but at least the schedule can be like that's a weakness, I guess you could say, but it's also like could be a fun weakness. Like you could go this season and beat Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss.
I don't think there's going to be a game this year outside of maybe. Who are your two gimmies? Marshall and UT Martin,
something like that. I don't know.
Those are going to be your two. Like, good fuck. First 2 weeks of the season,
gotta have them.
After that, it's like, oh shit.
Hey, everybody needs like a little mental break at some point during the season. Like, kick the feet up a little bit.
All right, well, we got 2 minutes left. Let's hit one more spin.
Before
we get out of here for the week.
Let's go. I'm glad that we already got the 2019 SEC Championship game out of the way then, because we could end on a good one.
2012 Florida.
Now, this one for me, this is the first college football game I ever watched all 4 quarters through and through.
Really?
This is the very first one that I that I can vividly remember sitting and watching for the entire time. There are multiple reasons for this. One of the reasons my childhood best friend was a Florida fan, and he was talking that shit the entire week, and I was sick of it. So I was like, I'm gonna watch this game. And then, so when Georgia won, I was on cloud 9, like, oh, I can't wait for carpool Monday morning, and I just get to talk his ear off about how Georgia won. But yeah, this game was like one of the first times that I started watching games in full, because I mean, again, I was 11 years old at the time, but one of the most memorable games of my life for that reason. Also just Jarvis Jones punching the ball out to secure the win for Georgia, and then Jones, Malcolm Mitchell breaking the tackle to run down for the game sealing touchdown. There were so many, but man, I remember going back and watching the highlights of this game on YouTube not too long ago, and the amount of turnovers that were in this game.
I think people forget how many interceptions Aaron Murray threw in this game.
Yeah, it was horrible.
This was not Aaron Murray's finest moment. There was that weird interception that was a fumble, the first drive of Florida's game that ultimately led to a Todd Gurley touchdown, where it took 15 minutes to review it. Jeff Driscoll got the ball hit as he threw it. It was ruled a fumble, but then they ruled it as an interception or vice versa. Yeah. I remember freshman Todd Gurley hitting the Gator Chomp, his first touchdown of the day. That very nice cutback of it was just like, oh man, these dogs are feisty. That
definitely was my wallpaper on my iPod Touch.
Oh man,
Todd Gurley hitting the Gator Chomp. Definitely was in the rotation. But yeah, for sure.
The funny thing about that game is you look back on it, and it's one of the finer moments from Georgia from the Mark Richt era, especially in the Florida game. But that game in between was just like, I don't want the football. You have it.
Here you go. I mean, I could not. When I watched it back, I was like, I do not remember this many turnovers.
I mean, the score was 9-10 late in the fourth quarter.
And had Georgia lost that game, probably do remember the turnovers, because God, we could have won this game had we not thrown 3 interceptions or whatever it was.
Obviously, Jarvis Jones went off in that game. I also remember, I don't remember who the Florida player was. There is a play, it's 3rd and 4. Florida runs an end around to their left with a wide receiver, and Sean Williams literally knocks the Florida receiver unconscious. The way he grabs him is the most unique tackle. He puts him in a pseudo headlock and slams his head on the ground, and he is literally just unconscious on the side. I remember thinking that, oh.
He demonstrated it.
What?
You do going like that. Just cracked me up.
I mean, that's what he looked like. He had a helmet on, obviously, but if you ever go back and watch the play, be on the lookout for that. I believe it was in the first half. Also, a Sanders Cummings interception at the end of the first half.
Sanders Cummings.
Florida was driving in the red zone. Interception seal that end of the first half. Very, very fun game to watch from a Georgia defensive standpoint. I think that is the peak of what a Todd Grantham defense looks like. Hey, there's a lot of turnovers going on.
There's some high highs And there are some low lows.
And it just turned out that the lows got lower and lower.
You know where there aren't any lows?
Here.
On this show.
Right
there weren't
here.
any lows this week, even with the boss man out of town. I think we had a great week of show, Christian, even if it was, we got to do 2 shows of just me and you. We appreciate you guys for sticking around with us, still supporting us, despite the fact that Brooks, the main voice of the show, the boss man around these parts, was not here. He will be back next week, though. And we'll be back on Monday for another loaded show sheet and another great show. Until then, we love you.